should be live now.
Okay.
And it'll take just a minute for it to pop up.
Yeah, I'll play one.
First things first, anyone who is here immediately, just let us know how our sound is and that you can see us. Be live now.
Okay.
Okay.
That wasn't me. For a second, I thought that was me playing.
No, that was on my side. And that's on the Discord per usual. Okay. Yeah, so we should be live now. Yeah, just let us know.
Yeah, we have some people watching, so people are already rolling in.
So today I'm with Eva, or is it Eva?
It's Ava. Yeah.
Ava. Okay.
It's very difficult. I know. It's
I should have asked you that before we went on. We talked for about 30 minutes. Okay, Eva. No, Ava. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Just pretend it's an A.
Ava. So, I told you this before we went live, but I just came across your channel a couple of weeks ago, and I was very, very impressed with what you do there. I definitely encourage everyone to go check it out. I think it's, I love spreadsheets. I love data. So I was immediately like, who's this person? And I can't wait to read these spreadsheets and see what's going on here. But well beyond that, I think just you're very bright. And I think your way of sort of articulating things and also being kind of very reasonable and not super oh my God, these are, is sort of my style of content and what I tend to like. I do think a lot of people here will probably really enjoy your channel, so I would definitely recommend them checking that out. And yeah, when I saw that, I wanted to have a conversation. I'm very interested in sort of, I don't know you at all. And so I'm very interested, and I bet other people are here too, sort of who you are a little bit. What is your background in Pokemon, in finance, and market stuff? And what brought you to start your YouTube, that sort of thing, and do what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as you said, my name is Ava, and I've been making YouTube videos for a little bit now. However, I didn't start making ones that were specifically focused on Pokemon investing. And when I say investing, of course, a lot of it is more speculating, because it is fairly high risk, as we all know. This is not financial advice. We got to throw that disclaimer out there, right at the beginning. But really, one day I just was kind of bored. And after a day of making spreadsheets for work, I decided to relax. And naturally, I thought I should make a spreadsheet right now, but for Pokemon. And so I made that, and, I already had it. And I thought that I might as well make a video about it because I thought it was interesting. I had never really made a video like that. This one was a analysis of Sun and Moon Pokemon sets specifically, but I didn't think anyone would really be interested in anything like that. However, apparently people did like it. And I was really happy because this is the stuff that I really enjoy talking about the most. So I just kept making videos since then. However, I've been in Pokemon a lot longer. I've been collecting on and off since, I was a kid. I never really had a super long period where I was out of the hobby. Obviously, though, when I was younger, I didn't have any sort of budget to collect cards. But nowadays, I am spending a little bit more on trading cards. And in terms of finance and kind of how that relates to this, I am a college student and I'm getting a degree in economics and also East Asian languages, which is a bit random, but might as well throw that out there. And I also work part-time, about 20 hours a week, as an intern with a value investing group specifically. So, we're really focused with the value, obviously the companies we're buying, and it's about trying to find companies that we think are undervalued by the market. And, we invest with a long time horizon, and these kind of are my personal values, and it's what I really enjoy. And it's kind of the philosophy that I carry over to my personal investing, whether it's stocks or also trading cards, of course. So that's the kind of stuff that I hopefully am promoting on my channel. And of course, I try and talk about the risk as well. So I have some videos that are dedicated to that. Nobody watches those ones. but I think those ones are probably the best ones. So yeah, that's just kind of what my channel's been like lately. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me on, Jake. I'm very excited to be here.
So let's see. So I'm interested in, I guess I want to start with just a question that is a little bit like, when I think of the Pokemon market, and I'll start, but I think for the vast majority of people, Pokemon should not be viewed as like fundamentally as an investment vehicle, first and foremost. And that talking about the market and investment is both really fun and part of like how I just really enjoy that stuff. You probably do too, just as like literally it's just fun and interesting. And if we collect in sort of a smarter way, we're going to end up spending less money over time. Our collection is going to be more valuable in the long run. And there are probably things that you can do along the way to, whether it's flipping or moving money around or buying things that you think are particularly undervalued and are going to do better in the long run, could probably do well, but probably you should not first and foremost be looking this as an investment vehicle. That's how I personally view these things. I think the majority of people are probably in that boat, honestly, at the end of the day. But I sometimes feel that it's unclear when we or anyone comes out with, with investing videos, sort of what do we mean? Do we mean that do we think that people should be putting in 60, 70, 80% of their money in even the best items in this versus more traditional investing, these types of things? And, again, this is not financial advice. These are two people with opinions talking about this sort of stuff. And I'm just interested in sort of your genuine opinion as a 21-year-old who's interested in this stuff,
Yeah.
What do you think of all that?
Okay. I'll do what I can. So yeah. Definitely the first thing is the like 60 to 80% should not be, anyone should not have 60 to 80% of their like savings be in Pokemon cards. I like when I talk about like my, net worth, when I'm really just calculating how much money I've saved for like my personal savings goals, I usually don't include like my Pokemon collection to any extent, which is like, I think maybe a little excessively bearish, but I just, I think you have to have a high risk tolerance when you put any money into collectibles, expecting them to retain value or especially appreciate in value. And I don't think that's everyone. But like you said, I'm 21 and I have very low living expenses because I have like a full scholarship for my university. So I don't have to pay rent and I have, income. So most of my income is disposable. And so it all goes to savings. And then, some of it goes to trading cards as well. And in terms of it like being an investment for most people, I don't think it should be either. And I think that if you only think of it as an investment, it's not something that you should be doing because, I think the passion and enjoyment for it is what is going to keep you going when things, in the hobby aren't going very well. It's not always going to be like sunshine and rainbows. I think we all know that. But the passion, I think, is also what's going to drive you to like take the time to actually research and know what you're buying and kind of have that awareness. Whereas if it's just like investment to you, I don't know if you'll have the wherewithal because collectibles are like incredibly high risk. And if it's things that you aren't willing to keep just for your own personal enjoyment, you might end up being really anxious, I think, over time. And obviously I have a lot of things behind me that I didn't purchase expecting any sort of return. There are a lot of singles there that are just things that I really like and want to have in my personal collection. So I think, there are a few prerequisites. First, if we're talking about from an investing perspective, you have to have a high risk tolerance. And then the second is that it has to be something that you actually do enjoy as a hobby as well. And you have to have the disposable income, of course. Like you have to have money to do this that you do not need to survive. And you should not be, I don't think you should be leveraging in trading cards. Just want to throw that one out there. So when I talk about it, I think in a lot of my videos, I do talk about these types of things, but, I think it is more for people who are interested in that aspect, because for me, this is just how my brain works. I love, like, ever since I was a kid, I've always loved trying to get a good deal, and just always being like frugal with my money. And that just kind of transfers over to everything I like. And so it just kind of naturally combines itself with Pokemon cards, especially lately, when it does seem like there is some valid potential for returns in the future. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my take on that. I don't know what you think, but I don't think it's for everyone. And I think that, people should be aware of the risks.
I agree with everything you just said across the board. Honestly, it's exactly how I think about it for myself. And the reason that I do it is because I feel comfortable with the other things that I have. I really, really enjoy it. And I put so much time and effort into knowing every single thing. And I can tolerate and feel comfortable and almost enjoy the risk while also having enough money and enough savings and enough other stuff that I feel safe and comfortable. And that is like, that to me is the equation where it makes sense for me. But even with all that, I definitely do not feel confident that going forward, my money in Pokemon cards that's just going to be sitting there, this is my non-flipping money, is going to outpace my purchasing of individual stocks, or index funds or what have you. I don't know that to be fact. I have no idea. We shall see how that goes. I do think that when I was buying extremely, extremely heavily before 2020, in 2019, 2018, the upside when comparing this hobby to other hobbies was so much bigger than it is now. There still is quite a bit of upside when we compare the amount of vintage cards and we're not just talking about all vintage cards, we're at certain cards, trophy cards, certain rarer cards, to the amount of those cards that exist in other more established collectible hobbies. Like, there's still room for it to potentially go up. But I do think that people have to understand that when a card is $1,500 or $25,000, in order for that to 10x again, needs to get to $250,000, which requires so much more spending power and so many more individuals who are willing to spend that type of money. It's much easier for that card to go from $5,000 to $25,000, which is what, a lot of those sort of higher end vintage cards did. And I think in order for it to continue to sort of outpace over time on a percentage growth basis, the stock market is highly questionable at best. And in fact, I would be really happy if most of my Pokemon cards, like, I try to buy quite a bit under market, which helps. But if most of my Pokemon cards went up on average over a long period of time, 3% a year, and I would never consider that 3 to 5% a year a good investment, particularly for the risk involved. It's very common knowledge, right? Everyone out there, the higher the risk, the more reward you want to get from something. And if we think Pokemon cards are pretty high risk, we would hopefully want more of that. So I offset that by just how much I love doing this and enjoy doing it, and my friendships and the community and all that sort of stuff. That's where I come from on that. Sounds like maybe a similar place, but maybe you're more bullish on how your investments or speculations are going to do. What do you think? Give me a little bit about your overall thoughts on the market. What do you think is gonna, if you had to guess, is gonna go up a higher percentage? Is it modern sealed, vintage sealed, modern singles, vintage singles, graded cards? What do you like, and sort of why?
Yeah. It's hard to say. One thing for sure is I do tend to lean more towards modern. And, you were talking more about how in 2019 and earlier, you would buy and flip a lot. And I think a lot of those opportunities have kind of dried up. There's definitely still there. I used to buy lots and flip them a lot, actually, back like before 2020. And then during 2020, I was selling a lot of singles. I don't know, I maybe bought like 10 singles all year. It was not a lot. So that was a period where I was definitely doing a lot of selling or buying things, like you said, that I can get significantly below market value. However, that's become a lot more difficult. And then when we start talking about that, that's not really investing per se, because it is more business-like, not even like necessarily business, but like a type of side hustle, if you will, or it's just like it's not quite the same, because it's not the long-term perspective. And I think there is still potential in that, but you definitely need to be willing to spend more time, and it takes more skill than it used to. And it's a bit more nuanced. So like, I think it's harder to get a good deal on eBay now than it used to be. So maybe going to other platforms. For example, sometimes I will buy singles from Bai, particularly like Japanese exclusive ones, because I found that I can get them below the like US market rate that way. And that's like one way that you can potentially still get that type of arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of like my actual like investing perspective, it is mostly going to be modern sealed. And that's because I think that the most important thing, I harp on this a little bit on my channel, is minimizing the downside risk. And so with modern sealed, I don't know for certain that it's going to, outpace vintage or singles, in any significant way or at all. However, I'm pretty confident in the floor of these prices. So for example, if you're paying $80 for a Fusion Strike booster box, it might go down, worst case to $70. But then over time, it will continue to appreciate. And this just has to do with the logic of the supply of sealed product. And so for any given set that's out of print, so like, more than 2 years old, the supply is going to be ever decreasing, and it's going to look like this type of shape. I'm not sure if this is reversing for everyone, or if I should say like this, but a lot of it is going to be opened at the beginning. And I don't think that this is going to be as steep of a curve as it used to be, but I think it'll still hold true. I don't think that we're going to see those types of returns. So when I say that I like modern sealed, I don't like it because I think it's going to perform like vintage. But I do think that a 10% return per year is possible. And that's something that I would be very, very happy with. And for me, part of why I like,
you think?
sorry, what?
Compounding, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
And, I think a lot of this has to do with like how many years we're talking about, because a lot of times, that growth isn't going to be linear. A lot of that could be towards, the latter half of say a 10 or 20-year period. And that doesn't really bother me because this, I'm buying these with money that I don't need. So I'm willing to have a lot of that return be at the end, because, a lot of people are keeping things sealed. But I do think that ultimately, even though, a lot of people say that they want to hold things for a long time, they might not necessarily do so. And I know some people will just crack them open. So that's also part of why I think modern sealed is good. And just, investing in trading cards or speculating in them also makes it so much easier for me to just be like, very rational with my actual like investing portfolio. I keep it all like business over there. And I don't take anything that I think is like excessively risky. I don't buy like, stocks hoping up for like crazy returns. So in that way, like I'm able to stick to my principles and everything, where, it's about minimizing the downside risk. So in terms of what will outperform, I think that modern sealed might outperform, just because we're talking about percentages. Like you said, it's so much easier to go to 5,000 than it is to go to 25,000. And there's just also, there's a price barrier. Once you start getting above like $1,000, the pool of buyers starts to decrease a lot. Whereas I think it's much more, many more people can afford to buy a box for say $200 than they could for $2,000. So I think that is a bit of an element of that there. And then of course, when we talk about outperforming, it depends on like how the economy as a whole does in the future and how Pokemon reacts to that and all of those things, which can definitely change things. So it's very nuanced, but there's like a quick gist of my pitch.
With a lot of what you said, there are a couple things I think I disagree with, or maybe slightly disagree with. And to play devil's advocate, I'm going to throw out like a couple of historical examples where, so if we look at sports, there are lots of booster boxes from the 80s and 90s that were selling for $50 when they came out that are now $15. Even though sports has ballooned and you have tons and tons of $1 million cards. And so one thing that's interesting that happened in sports, and I'm not saying it's the same as Pokemon, I think it's important to understand how that's different and why Pokemon could react like that in the future versus why it may not. Clearly, during that sports card era, just to give a little bit of context, are you familiar with 80s and 90s sports at all?
I don't know. Do I seem like someone who likes sports very much? I don't think I do, if I'm being honest, but I
Sure.
can
I
appreciate
think,
a good
but I think
analogy.
from a collectibles market perspective, it's important to look at these sort of historical hobby examples because they're very similar. But so the basic the basic idea of why this has happened is a few reasons. One is that modern sports has actual chase now, and one of ones and inserts. And a lot of these 80s and 90s products, although not only were they printed into the ground, but they didn't have chase cards. And so all of the cards were extremely common. Pokemon is doing a much better job of actually providing some rarity and some chase cards with some cards that may hold up value over time. One is a big difference. And two, but I should say one thing that may not be different is what if Pokemon starts doing serialized cards or starts doing one of ones or one of 100s or one of 10s like sports did, because that also really hurt the value of products that didn't have those types of inserts or those types of rare items. Now, some items from the 90s have held more value in sports, particularly the ones in basketball with Jordans, with good inserts, with these types of things, but others have been worthless, even though sports has 30x'd, probably since the 80s. And there's this idea that just because something gets old, it has to be valuable, which there are plenty of collectible historical examples where that isn't true. So what do you think of those data points when you say something like Pokemon boxes will definitely go up, or I feel very, very confident that will go up? Why do you feel confident in Pokemon versus maybe some of the examples I just gave?
Yeah, well, I think that, it should also be like stipulated that I'm not buying everything that comes out. I think that's, really important point to bring up because, you're talking about the sets. I'm guessing that they, obviously they were like inferior to the later sets, but probably even just like in a bubble by themselves weren't that good. Maybe they didn't have that good of players. However, the sets that have been coming out lately have been, compared to historicals, like far above average, just in like the quality of the cards that are in them and the quantity of those cards. So I think part of that, definitely does help. And, I'm not collecting every set, like I was saying, like I'm not, putting any money really into Rebel Clash. I'll maybe buy like my one booster box so that I can have it because I'm a bit of a completionist. I like to have one of everything. But we might say that the sets going forward will be like continue to be better and better, but that's definitely not clear, especially when you think back to things like, some beloved eras really have become kind of the e-reader era. A lot of people love the Neo stuff, but after that, there were still worse sets. And I think that we can't expect that the Pokemon sets going forward will always be good. And I think, the era we're in, I think is kind of like a modern golden era just because of the cards that are coming out in these sets. You can really see the quality increase after Vivid Voltage, I think. People shit on Battle Styles, but I do still think it is a good set. And so, things like Fusion Strike, maybe aren't as good as Evolving Skies. People love that set. I'm not buying that set because I think it's overpriced. But I think when we actually go back and look that, in the grand scheme of things, it is like a very, very good set. So I think that's something to also like keep in perspective. And then another thing that does come into play a lot is how much it's printed. So a lot of times printing can play just as much of a role as the actual cards in the set. For example, a team up booster box right now is probably going for like $800 or $900. Whereas Cosmic Eclipse, which is either the second best or really I think probably about as good as Team Up, is going for like $500. This is mostly because Team Up was only ever printed once, so it never had a reprint. Now, I don't know if we're going to see sets like that, but you can buy, towards the end of a product life cycle when you are fairly confident that it won't be printed again. And if you're aware of all these reprints and keep those things in mind, I think that will give you an advantage. So it's not really to me about buying all of these things when they come out. It's about picking and choosing what things I think are undervalued. This kind of has to do with the whole value investing thing. And so I think as a whole, modern sealed might not outperform, but I think that you can make fairly confident decisions with certain sealed products relative to singles. I think singles are a lot harder to guess, and sealed just has that advantage because it is a basket of cards. So you don't have to get the exact card right. You just kind of have to get the set right. And I think that's much more feasible. I don't know what you think of that, but that's kind of the way I look at it. And, modern sealed isn't the only thing I buy, of course. but I think it's something that I think it's the easiest thing to kind of explain to people because it doesn't quite require the amount of like dedication and like nuance that talking about like singles does. I think it's really, really dangerous to promote like singles to viewers and that type of thing. And sealed, of course, you want to explain like the risks and whatnot. But like historically, like sealed kind of, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. So, you know, when I
think that's not necessarily true. So a few things. So I agree again with most of that to start. So I'm just for a sake of debate, I'm just picking up on a couple of things. So one thing is that demand is very hard to, in my opinion, to predict, and things age very differently than how they're experienced in the present moment. So to say that these sets are really good sets or that these sets are better than previous sets, that's how people feel now. Maybe. I'm not sure if they'll feel that in 5 years. And there's plenty of examples where that hasn't been the case. There were sets that were very popular when they first came out that became less popular over time. And then examples that were very unpopular when they first came out and then became very valuable and expensive over time due to rarity, these types of things. A couple of examples off the top of my head, like Generations, Dragon Majesty, you know, these were particularly Dragon Majesty, like talk about like probably nobody talked about Dragon Majesty. You know, Evolution's incredibly disliked until the flood of, you know, new people coming back in, eating up, you know, all that supply. Now, there are reasons why some of these sets were disliked, not having enough popular Pokemon, too much of the product, like Evolutions. You know, sometimes when there's just so much on the market, it just becomes boring. It's so easy to get that it's like, it's not fun anymore and you've already pulled all the chase cards. So I do think that thinking about and looking at why did this set succeed over time versus that set succeed over time is really good. And this is not me saying that the current sets are not going to age well, but I think it's dangerous when you pay up for what is the fad or what is the current liked thing. So for example, like when people were paying really high prices for rainbow, there are a lot of rainbow rares that are cheaper now than they were at certain times, you know, over the last couple of years. You know, now rainbow rares are really down where alt arts are really high. Now, could something come in and replace alt arts where there's a good time to buy alt art? You know, so I very much agree with your point that it's hard to predict that you said later. And it's hard to predict those singles. But I do think that these sets are made up of singles. And there is, particularly when the sets are not that rare, like I don't think any of these sets are going to be rare for a really long time with the amount they're printing. I do think because of that, they're going to rely more heavily on the expected value and the actual cards inside than some, you know, middle generation sets that maybe weren't loved very much. You know, Black and White's a great example, right? We have some really, you know, even to this day, really not liked Black and White sets that have no cards that are very valuable, but the boxes are still $2,000, $3,000 specifically on rarity. That being said, I don't fundamentally disagree. I think modern sealed product going up 5 to 10% every year is possible. You might see 4 years of like no growth and then a doubling in a year. You know, it might look like many different things. It's also possible it might go down and you might not be able to sell it, or Pokemon in general may go down in popularity. We also see things in other hobbies where just the most expensive stuff keeps going up in value, where the rest of the hobby dies and decreases. So there's a lot of ideas out there that are not backed up by other hobbies, by like historical data, like, well, vintage can't, or some of these trophy cards can't keep going up if modern doesn't keep going up. It's like, no, that's not necessarily true, because these markets can actually work separately. But I think that it's usually true. You know, I think usually it's probably going to be true. And these things are probably going to be pretty connected for a while. I do think that part of what really raised the prices of modern was the vintage prices finally getting up off the ground. You know, they were basically on the ground forever before this year in a lot of ways. And that sort of allowed the doubling and tripling. You know, some of the 10xing in vintage allowed some of the double, triple, quadrupling, 5xing we saw in some of these modern sets too. What do you make of all of that and some of those maybe slight counter arguments to some of what you said, while understanding that we probably agree on most of it?
Yeah, well, you know, it's always good to like get into the nitty gritty and kind of where the holes are in your reasoning, because like there is no perfect thesis. I think that's always true. There's always a a bear base and bull case is something that, we talk a lot about in value investing, where, you can have your expectation, but it's not going to work out that way. I think it's really important to talk about, just because something happened in the past doesn't mean that was what's likely to happen, or that buying that thing at that price was a good investment. Things can work out, but maybe it wasn't the right choice. For example, like, you can buy a lottery ticket and win the lottery, but statistically speaking, that is a bad choice, because those companies make money off of that for a reason. But I just have to say that I like black and white, so I want to throw that one out there right away. I think it's a great era.
You like Emerging Powers?
I really like Dark Explorers. There's an Entei in there. It's good stuff. Plasma Storm, also a banger.
Emerging Powers has like $10 to $15 cards in it. Even the chase cards are like $20-$25.
I mean, I don't like all of black and white, but I loved, the advent of the full art card. Like, I remember that it was so exciting to me. Obviously, there were legend cards before that, which I also love and adore. And some of my favorite cards of all time are legend cards. But like, to actually address your points and get back to that, I think, like what you said, not buying into the fad is incredibly important. So, when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about buying. I think Evolving Skies is going for like 180, 190 right now. I would literally never promote that to anybody. I don't care if it goes up to $500 in the next 5 years. The risk there is so high. And like you're saying, it could be popular now, but that doesn't mean it will continue to be. But when we're talking about buying things that maybe aren't quite as loved right now, the concern of them not being the most popular set in the future is like less so, right? Because it already isn't. So if you're buying an Evolving or a Fusion Strike booster box, that's the one that I'm just going to use as the example, because I think it's a good set for $80. I think it's a good price to pay for that booster box. It's pretty easy to get a 5 to 10% ROI on that over time, because what you're starting at is very low. So people say that the difference between buying a box for like $80 and it going to 200 versus 120 to 200 isn't that big. I think it's massively different. One of them, you're getting like a 66% return on your investment, and then the other one, you're getting 150% return on your investment. So if you spent the same amount on those products, you're going to be doing a lot better. And when you chase the fad, this is also something that goes into regular investing. When you chase the fad, a lot of times the easy money has been made. So for example, like if we're talking about actual stocks and you see something on the front page of Yahoo Finance, that's not something that I'm going to see that article and go buy, because by the time it's on there, a lot of times, the short-term gains have been made. And I'm not saying it's going to be overpriced, but I don't think by that point that it'll still be undervalued. This doesn't always hold true. But a lot of times, the things that are the best investments are the things people are least excited about. There's a lot of fear and greed. People say emotion isn't important in the market, but like it is, especially when we're talking about a hobby. I think it definitely is. And, when you don't give in to the hype and the FOMO, I think you're able to make like much more rational choices. So if you're always buying the hottest thing, that's concerning to me, for sure. I'm guessing you probably agree with that. But for example, like I have these 2 boxes back here. I would never recommend the Ultra Premium Collection to anybody as an investment at $350, because it's already gone up so much in a short period of time. People say that means it's going to the moon, but that also could be that the short-term gains have all just happened right away. You know what I mean? The gains in the next 5 years could have all just happened. And people aren't opening that many of these. That might change when they open up the grading for the metal cards again. But this is a great product. I don't deny that. I have one in my collection. I didn't pay $350 for it, but I do have one because I want to have one in my collection. But I would not promote it as an investment for that reason. So I think it's about finding the things that are underappreciated. And also, expected value. I think this one's really fun to talk about as well. I've actually done a few videos on my channel where I break out the expected value of a box based off of the current market prices on TCG Player, and then like the pull rate data. Usually it's from TCG Player Infinite. They have some pretty good data there from like 10,000 packs. So then we can kind of get as close as we can to an expected value. And this I'm really excited about, because this is just the kind of stuff that I love to talk about and I think is very cool. And at the time when I did it, for example, for Evolving Skies, the EV was below the current market price, which often makes sense. A booster box likely the EV should be lower than the price. Otherwise, there's an arbitrage opportunity. This might be different when the set first comes out, obviously, because the supply of singles is very low relative to the supply of sealed, but that relationship inverts over time. So when I did it for Brilliant Stars, right after it came out, it actually had a plus EV. But I think over time, if we went back to that now, it might not be the case anymore. But I think, like you were saying, EV is really important to talk about when we're talking about these boxes, because it does give you some downside protection. So if we're talking about, a set like Brilliant Stars, if you're paying 120 for it and the EV is also 120, that gives you more downside protection than something like if Evolving Skies is 180, and even if the EV of a box is 150, which it's not, you don't have as much downside protection there. And of course, it depends on a lot of factors like reprints, age of the set, etc. But I think you get what I'm saying there.
But yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. And I want to add, expected value also helps with more opening and a really good chase card, and also a lot of good variation. So for example, like when we look historically, Burning Shadows stopped getting opening up because even though it had a great chase card, that rainbow rare Charizard was so hard to pull. But then you have other sets that had more of a variation. I think Vivid Voltage, when it first came out, was a really good example because it had all those amazing rares. It had the rainbow rare Pikachu. Like it had both that higher chase and sort of those easier to get cards that were cool and enjoyable and provided value, like a well-balanced set. And I think when we look at streamers and online, I talk to a lot of online streamers who sell, and I ask them, what are people buying? What are the most popular things? And it's things like Brilliant Stars, phenomenal. With all the character rares. Cosmic Eclipse was a humongous, like people loved that. Hidden Fates because of that whole huge shiny, and the babies, and Evolving Skies, big popular one because so many chase cards that people are looking for, and so many popular Pokemons with Eevee, not just in their alt art forms, but also even their full art forms, people loving those. So I do think that I'm very much in agreement with the idea that generally speaking, value investors, and I'm sure you're steeped in this with your internship, right? Or just, but are looking for, and there's a long debate, Warren Buffett earlier on his career really just focusing on undervalued things. And this is an interesting debate around Evolving Skies, I think specifically. Should I have bought, so I bought a bunch of Evolving Skies at $100, like $95 to $100. And I also bought a bunch of Chilling Reign and Battle Styles at $72 a box at the same time. Which one was better? Which is a better buy? Those at 72 or Evolving at 100? And I came to the conclusion that I have no idea, just to throw it out there. And so I thought both were probably pretty good price points. But it gets into this idea. Warren Buffett earlier in his career used to invest in, Battle Styles and Chilling Reign are not this bad, but he used to invest in very bad companies, very poor companies, but that were very, very cheap and undervalued, where the difference between his evaluation of the company and the actual evaluation was actually bigger, right? And oftentimes when people are panicking and there's the worst stuff, you can get an even lower amount. And something you've talked about on our channel I saw is understanding that those companies in this case, or those items, might have more downside risk. And so you're going to want more possible upside potential in order to go into something like that. But over the course of Warren Buffett's career, he started to invest in better companies and wanting to hold them for longer rather than trying to get really good deals on stuff that was inferior. And I think it's just an interesting idea. I don't think there's necessarily an answer, but it's like, when Evolving Skies hits to 180 versus Battle Styles and Chilling Reign at like 80, that's or 90, that's a humongous difference. But, when they're closer together, which one should you buy, right? Should you buy that? And then, and it's a tough call. I don't think that there's an obvious answer, but it's an interesting debate, I think. What do you make of sort of those points or those ideas? Is that something that you think about?
Yeah, Buffett is a value investing icon.
Sure.
And another thing that he said that goes along with this, I'm pretty sure he said once something along the lines of that he'd rather buy a great company for a good price than a good company for a great price, which gets at what you're saying here. And I think when you're giving that example, both of those are at the very least good prices, in my opinion. So I would say Evolving Skies there for sure. But I don't think that he would say necessarily he'd rather buy a great company at a fair price than a good company at a great price. I think that's where we start getting into the nuance. And it's all about like, you really have to like actually go in and compare the things with the numbers. For example, if right now, Fusion Strike or Chilling Reign, because I think both of them are very good sets, and Battle Styles as well, we're closer to like 120, and Evolving Skies we're at 160. I think it might be a different story there, because for example, I made a video talking about why in relation to Evolving Skies Fusion Strike would be better right now, because at the time Evolving Skies was twice the price of Fusion Strike. Now it's more than twice the price, but part of it that I gave as an example was using some precedent. So I used Cosmic Eclipse and Unified Minds, because I think both are good sets, but I think it's commonly agreed that Cosmic Eclipse is better. I think most people would agree, but Cosmic Eclipse is like 1.56, at least at the time of the video, I believe that's what it was, times more expensive than Unified Minds. So if that relationship would be similar for Evolving Skies and Fusion Strike, then Fusion Strike should have a higher percentage ROI, in the next few years, if they theoretically would approach that rate. This is only one framework for it. Obviously you want to go and test, a few different ways of looking at things, because this is just a precedent and an example, and these aren't one-to-one, and it depends on a lot of things, like reprints, of course. But I think that's one way of kind of explaining why, when something is so much more affordable, that it can be a good option. And like you're saying, he kind of moved on to like bigger and better things over time. And I think this is a natural habit of collectors as well. When I first started collecting, I was not buying like, crystal Lugias. I think I have one. Oh, it fell over. They always fall over. But I've got like a crystal Lugia back there. I was not buying those types of things. And as, I had like a bigger budget, and I had, more of a diverse collection and whatnot, and I just sometimes I prioritize my personal preferences over investing, and sometimes it's just not an investment at all. But I think it's perfectly fine to say that I would rather buy this higher quality product, even if there's a lower ROI, for like a lot of reasons, because this is a hobby, of course, and also depending on who you are, you might not want to spend the time to deal with $80 boxes. If you have a very high income, it might be more worth your time to just buy the $10,000 item that will gain like 8%. This is obviously not guaranteed, but a theoretical example, that will gain 8%, than the thing that is $80 and will gain 12%, year over year, just because, it's not worth your time. When we actually go to sell these things, it's not as easy with stocks. With stocks, it doesn't really matter what the actual number is that the stock costs. Like if Google does a split, it doesn't really matter, because you can still sell them all just as easily. But for Pokemon cards, the price does matter. So, and that goes for businesses as well, because when he's actually like getting in there with businesses, by the time he's like so massive, it's not as worth his time to deal with, these very small distressed companies. However, they are, of course, still very valid investments. Like Berkshire Hathaway, I think was originally just some distressed company he bought. It's still actually the name. What?
Yeah, textile company.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a bad company, and he didn't do a good job. I
think that's like an amazing story, and a great example. But obviously nowadays he's probably not looking at distressed textile companies, but there's still a place for that. I think
absolutely, and I think just to put a maybe a slightly finer point on it, is that it depends on how much income you have and how much money you're looking to invest. And one thing that Warren Buffett will talk a lot about is that when you have billions of dollars, and this is this is really what you're saying, but to just pin it down, you can't buy $1 billion of Pokemon, but you can buy $1 billion of Apple. So part of the reason I got into Pokemon, for example, versus sports or some of the other bigger collectible hobbies, even though I liked all of them, part of it's because I like Pokemon the best. But the other part was that I could be a whale in Pokemon with the amount of money that I had, and I could go after the types of items I wanted to here. Whereas if I had more money, I would have done the same thing in sports, and so it's the same thing for people out there. It's understanding where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And so distressed Pokemon items or something using these ideas, right? Like they might be a little bit more risky and you might have to buy a lot more of them in order to actually make any significant amount of money. And it might take more time to actually sell them, but you could probably make quite a bit more. So I still do some of that stuff. I bought hundreds of baby shinies at 70 cents a shiny one day when TCG Player, it was at the very lowest of the market, and TCG Player had like a 15% or 20%, I think, off sale. And I went in first thing in the morning and I grabbed all the cheapest ones across the board, and with the plan of that's a very, very long-term, plan of hopefully maybe grading some, selling some over time, probably 10xing my money, hopefully eventually, in the long run, which is only selling them at seven or so dollars each, but for the amount of time and effort and the amount of sales and all these sorts of things, even in my highest possibility, I will probably make $5,000, or $7,000 doing that. Whereas I could go onto Golden auctions probably, or Heritage auctions, and I do this and I can buy a $25,000 lot and then flip it a week later at times for 30,000 just by breaking it down.
Oh yeah. No, auctions have
and
so quite a habit. They're a dangerous habit.
I think part of why the Pokemon hobby and why flipping works so well in this hobby is because with that sort of knowledge and the capital, you can find you can't go to Apple and say, hey, if I buy 1,000 shares, will you give me, hey man, if I buy more of your shares, will you sell it for cheaper than the current going rate on the market? Right. That doesn't exist. So whereas in Pokemon, you can do that and people can sell below market theoretically without it lowering the market, particularly if they're private sales. Now it's a little bit more complicated because, if you see a bunch of those sales public, that might end up lowering the market and no one will buy them from you for higher than you bought it. But particularly in large lots, and I'm still doing that today, and that's still possible, but for sure it's something that the more capital, the more money that you have where you can buy those bigger lots, the better you're going to do with that. But, I'm buying still modern lots that I think I'll 5x my money on. And I think we will see more of them. We saw a ton of them in December when I was buying most of them. I think we will going forward. There'll be times where people just get tired of Pokemon and they sell their mint modern, sword and shield binders. And there might be some good sort of lower end, you put in $100 and you get out 300. And that's what a lot of us did to kind of get going. And I think those opportunities will always be there for people who are willing to kind of work as long as there's liquidity in the market, which I think that there's very good liquidity right now. And people are still, buying and selling a decent amount. So what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, flipping, I think is just I think it's a totally different section, kind of the monetary side of the Pokemon hobby. And I think it's one that's definitely viable. I think it definitely requires more skill and dedication, as we've been kind of saying already. And one of the concerns, and why I try not to talk about it too much on my channel, is because I don't want to encourage people who, maybe don't have the expertise or the time or you have to have because when you flip, you're buying something with the expectation of turning it around quickly, right? So there's the expectation that you will have some money coming back to you and some kind of free cash flow. But if that doesn't happen, people can get distressed, and then they might think that their thesis was wrong or that they overpaid, and they might take a deal that they shouldn't, or lose a significant percent of their profit margin or all of it. So I think if it's not something that you have experience with, now I don't think is that good of a time to start doing it if you've never done it before. And even if you've done it before, it's getting more difficult just to find those deals. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I think
that it's in some ways it's easier now than it was many years ago because there is, I think, more liquidity and things are still selling for more. Modern, it didn't even really exist. Now you have both the modern market and the vintage market to flip some of those things online. I think it's a math problem. You have to sit down, you have to really do the math, and you have to be serious about it. And in many cases, getting a job is going to be a much better. I mean, on the lower margins, getting a job is going to be, or an extra job is going to make you quite a bit more money in a much safer way than doing this sort of thing. But are you trying to flip in this market, the lower end stuff at all?
Me, so I'll buy some things from Buy. I'm
Yeah.
not selling any sealed product right now. And then singles, I've sold like a few cards in the past month. I think I sold like 4 or 5, so it was like $1,500 maybe worth of cards.
Mhm.
I haven't been doing it as much, but a lot of that is also just like I've been pretty busy. So, maybe in the summer I will do that more, but I have been like continuing to buy. But for me, like I'm saying, I don't need that cash flow. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm like willing to wait. There's an opportunity cost associated with waiting to sell these things. But if you're also thinking that, in a few months from now, it could be more expensive, then that, opportunity cost is of course worth it. But again, that does really depend. So the flipping thing, I think also, you're talking about these $25,000 lots. Like for most people, that would be a really, really bad purchase for them and a terrible idea. And just like the
Sure.
stress is like, could, even if it's a great choice, the stress might, make them make mistakes, or it could just not be worth it because of the stress.
Sure.
And also the hourly wage, like you're saying, especially when people are talking about like buying these like $1 cards, hoping they go to $2 or $3. By the time you've like taken out your fees and your shipping costs, and you're like, if you're packing up even like 20 of these per hour, like you're selling them lightning fast, you're maybe going to make like I don't know, like $10 an hour. And just for the amount of effort that you're putting in there, you could probably just do better at a job. In a lot of places, the
Uh,
minimum wage is higher than that. In Chicago, the minimum wage is about $10 an hour.
yeah, I think most people who do it, it's for fun.
Yeah.
And
No, it
it's
is fun. I like to do it for fun,
like
but
that side hobby, and you're fueling your hobby sort of with the hobby, and that's satisfying in some way.
yeah.
But yeah, I just think that every single second there's a deal that's under market. Now it has to be under market enough
Yeah.
for shipping and fees. You're going to make money, which is the hard part. eBay, PayPal, they're taking a huge cut of everything across the board. Much better to be them than to be the flipper, but and much safer and reliable. They're the house that always wins. Um, but again, I'm not talking mostly about $25,000 lots. I'm talking about $100 lots that people can go out there and over time you know flip. But again, it takes market knowledge and time and wanting to do it. I think I, I I always feel a little bit in these conversations sometimes that it's like, why can't all of these things be true? Like, I don't view there are plenty of ways to make money in this hobby, and they all have different areas of risk. I I get like, oh, I feel like sometimes I'm seeing in the chat a little bit, there's a little bit of this like, no, this is the best and it will always be the best and it has to be the best. It's always modern sealed. It's always like, I buy every single thing depending on price in this entire hobby across the board. And I have every single thing in my collection, every single thing behind me. And I think you can make money on everything depending on price point.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
is the truth. And I kind of feel like this whole like everyone's looking for like what is the best, what's the secret answer. It's really more about studying and doing the math. Like you sit down, you do the math, you see what this has been selling for, how often it's been selling for, how liquid it is. Then you see how much you can buy it for, how you can source it, where you can source it, and then how much you can source of it. Because part of the struggle of a lot of this stuff is if you are actually going to make money, you need to be able to repeat this over and over and over again. And that's hard too, because you might find a good lot every once in a while, but are you going to find really enough to retire, to do this full time? And I have a few friends who do it full time and they make it work through a lot of different things that they do. But it's not automatic to make $6,000 a month. And sometimes they'll make 15,000 a month, and sometimes they'll make two. They'll even have months where they lose. So it's definitely not for everyone. And I started the talk today saying that I don't fundamentally view any of this as a money making opportunity, and more for fun, and I just sort of enjoy all of these conversations and debates. But yeah, do you like, but the sense I get from you is that you feel that for the vast majority of people it makes the most sense to buy sealed modern. Am I getting you inaccurately?
So I think, really anybody could do any of these things. There are so many ways to make money in Pokemon. You could be an LGS, you could do all sorts of things. But what I'm like, I want to give advice that can be most easily applied to the most amount of people, and that will give like the most amount of value overall, increase social welfare the most, if you will. And I think that talking about these products in this way, and part of it is also that, it's kind of scary to me hearing people talk about buying certain items at like these really high prices. I think that it's better to talk about something that people are doing and trying to give them a better framework for it, because I think people are going to be buying modern sealed no matter what, but I think we can help people make more informed decisions on that.
Sure.
I used to basically exclusively flip cards, back in the day. Now I've just transitioned to doing this because, like you're saying, it's about like your income and what's worth it to you the most. Really, when I think about it, I don't mind just collecting these items right now and focusing on doing like, my actual job, where I'm also like learning skills that will also make me better at this in the long run. So I think I'm gaining more value there than I would even if I were making like $50 an hour, which would be really, really good if I were. And like you're saying, like to make that amount of money, you have to have a lot of capital. That's definitely true. So to be doing this like in a really, really profitable way, you have to have a lot of capital. I do think at any scale though, it can be really fun. When I was doing this, I would buy lots that were like usually under $1,000, and those ones are the ones where I think you can get that really high percentage ROI because the value is like lower of the cards, and people are less willing to take that time, and that's where you're going to get like the 3x usually. Obviously there are other ways to do it with expensive things, and like it gets different when you're talking about like grading raw cards and whatnot. But that is something that I definitely do enjoy doing. But I'm okay right now with buying those lots and then not doing the second half, which would just be selling the cards and just keeping keeping them on hand for now, because I've sold cards in the past, and I know that I will be doing it again in the future. It just depends on like how busy I am. And really, like, it just comes down to what you enjoy, because you can make money doing anything. I used to flip purses online, which, if you're doing it right, can have a pretty good profit margin. But Pokemon cards are more fun. I think you were saying earlier, like, you like doing Pokemon cards more than the stock market because they're more fun.
Yeah.
And I think really, like, there's no wrong way to enjoy your hobby, if you're being fiscally responsible, that is. It's really just about what you enjoy. And the thing you enjoy most might very well be the thing you're best at, I think that's just something that's kind of like intuitive. I'm not going to be a day trader because like it kind of disgusts me inside. Even if maybe I could make money doing it, I just wouldn't be enjoying it, and I think it would stress me out more than.
I have no idea how people make money day trading stocks. It makes no sense to me at all.
I think most people don't make money in the long run, and people who do say it are mostly on Reddit, and they probably aren't doing that well. Like, we could get into a like massive conversation about this.
The only way that day trading works in Pokemon is just what I was saying before, is that you can literally get deals at considered market, and then later in the day you can sell them for higher. The market has not moved. You just bought away under market.
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing. In day trading in stocks, you're trying to predict the movement of the market on any one given day. And whatever. It's
the concern there is also you're constantly moving in and out of the market, and you can get like a month of profit. Like, let's say in a month you made like 5% on $100,000, you'd be making $5,000, right? But in one bad day, you could lose 10K. And then you have to start over from that, which is like terrifying. And also, if you're in the market, like, the market always takes the elevator down and the stairs back up. If you're in a company, like when, something very bad happens in the economy, like you're screwed if you're a day trader. If you're like not, and you aren't counting on this for income, you're really pretty much fine, assuming the company that you're invested in weathers the storm, which it most likely will. But day trading, oh, just the only thing worse is options day trading.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that I don't understand. I don't pretend to understand. And if someone showed me a model that they followed that worked based on some sort of system, I'm not going to like sit here and disbelieve them. It's, I don't say that things don't work just because I don't understand them, but I definitely won't say that something works if I don't understand it. Is one, motto I try to live by is none of us know everything, and so you shouldn't assume that you have the best way of doing things, but you should not go along with someone if you don't understand why you're going along with them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that there are at least 10 people in the world, who make money doing options day trading. But those people are very special people. And that's like not most people, or day trading in general. Because you're not just like guessing timing is like so much more difficult than guessing direction. This goes for Pokemon as well, which is also like why I don't talk that much about like short-term fluctuations in the market and like, things being down overall like 10% from last month or whatnot, because it like doesn't concern me. And like that's like so much emotional effort to like invest in all of this stuff. And just when you do that, you're gonna be stressing yourself out like so much more. I'm a big fan of the like set it and forget it mentality when it comes to stocks and also trading cards. So yeah, when it comes to the like, certain things.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've lost 40% of my money in stocks multiple times in my life because through recessions, and it didn't feel good. But then each time it's doubled or tripled, and it has come back, and it's never going to feel good. But it sort of, you get used to it, I guess. It comes along with the territory, and Warren Buffett's quotes of, you're investing in a company that you believe in for the long term, so don't be concerned, with sort of short term what's happening, the long term vision of the company. So it's tough. I mean, it's why diversifying is so important, and if I lose over here, I have this other thing over here that's more stable. That's kind of how I deal with it all, and have always dealt with it.
Yeah. I mean, like, in the 2008 financial recession, my family was hit like very, very hard. My dad was a real estate developer, so like you can imagine. So like, it was pretty much like worst case scenario. And I think like if you've like been through something like that, especially like, I mean, I was very young, so it was like definitely like imprinted on me. Even if you're making reasonable decisions, like you really do have to be mindful of like that downside risk. And also there are ways that you can prepare for those things where it won't be some worst case scenario, where you have to sell your house. But like, it really, I mean, part of it is also just like maintaining some amount of liquidity so that when something bad happens, you're okay and you don't have to sell, or, you have the funds to just like keep doing what you're normally doing. But like, I don't know, just like if you've never been through anything like that, I think it's really hard to actually like imagine what it's like and understand that feeling, and just kind of get used to it. But also since I've like definitely seen like, I mean, if my Pokemon cards go to 0, it wouldn't be like nearly as bad as that. I feel like I'm just much more calm than I otherwise would be, and just a bit more detached from it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So, shall we take some questions? If anyone in the chat, if you see anything in the chat that you'd like. I guess one other thing that we were talking about before we went on, and I'm not sure you want to go in this direction at all, let me know. But, I'm curious, like, what is it like being you in this area? You're this very, very bright 21-year-old who I think is with mostly 33-year-old men right now in the financial, PokeTube or YouTube world. I think, I'm fascinated with where the passion came, for you with finances. And And I guess for, for Pokemon too, and just what it's been like for you to kind of deal with, with that so far.
Yeah. Well, for at least the interest in Pokemon,
Yeah.
I actually originally was interested in Yu-Gi-Oh. You can see this poster back there. But that's what
Yep.
my brothers collected. So I like some of my earliest memories were like playing Yu-Gi-Oh. I say
Yeah.
playing very loosely because like what you do when you're 4 years old probably isn't actually playing the trading card game. But that also just led to Pokemon, by the time I was like 7 or whatnot. And I've just kind of always stuck with it. And it's so wholesome. And it just brings back so many good memories. And it's just something that there's like so many positive associations with. So I think that's really fun. And then in terms of finance, kind of related to what I was saying earlier, I think from like a very young age, I was more money conscious than probably almost anyone my age. And, part of that was out of necessity. And also just like, especially, when I was like in middle school and high school, it's something that's very confusing to happen to you when you're like 7 or 8 years old, because it's just crazy how something like that can happen. And, it's like, if you don't understand it, it's like very scary and seems so helpless. But I guess like, I always just wanted to kind of better understand. I'm a very like analytical person. It's just kind of how I am. And, I guess in that like quest for understanding, like, I didn't know what a bubble was when I was 10 years old. I didn't understand anything like that. It just kind of led down that path towards finance. And, probably from like an earlier age than, a lot of people my age, I was, interested in finance and money and, very conscious of it. And so that's probably why I am here today, with my major that I am majoring in. But like, yeah, that's definitely like one part of it. And then being a woman,
Yeah.
so I don't want to say that it's not like super bad, especially in Pokemon, like relative to like Yu-Gi-Oh, I would say that it is an even smaller percentage of people who are women. Like, I used to go to locals all the time, for when I was in like middle school and early high school, before I went away to boarding school where it was just like not really feasible. So during that time, like when I went to Yu-Gi-Oh things, I was almost always the only girl. And then when I went to Pokemon things, usually there were at least like one or two other girls. It depends on how many people are there, of course. But then being online, I think, is a totally different thing. People online act very differently than they would in real life. People in real life are generally like much more polite, even if someone is like a little socially awkward, which, a lot of people who like trading cards are, myself included. I'm
Sure.
very proudly an introvert. But people will say things I don't think they would normally say in person. I gave you an example where recently I was on a Pokemon trading subreddit and I was trying to trade some cards, as you do. And someone was messaging me and we were working out a deal. And then, we had worked out our deal. And at the end, they said, yeah, I can do that if I can also get your Snapchat, which was incredibly creepy and uncomfortable to me. And of course, that did not happen. And, it's just weird because it's not even like I'm like putting my face out there. It shouldn't matter either way. But, I was on something that is very much not meant to be interpersonal like that. It's not Tinder or Bumble or whatever. It's
Yeah.
really just meant to be for that. And the fact that even there, something like that happened. And this was like, I normally don't use those subreddits very much. So this was like one of my first times, listing some of my own cards on there. It was just like, wow, this is a really bad first impression. Most people aren't like that. Obviously, most people are very, very nice. But like, there are people who I think also probably will respect me a bit less by default, or I have to like work harder to earn their respect. I feel like sometimes I have to be like, a lot of times, like when you're in a woman in a male dominant space, you feel like you have to be twice as good as everyone else to be treated the same, even if that's not necessarily true. But like in
Yeah.
finance, it's not as much of a like, a dude party, but it is still definitely male dominated. And so, trying to find your voice there, you definitely feel like you have something to prove that I don't think that as many other people would. And like I did robotics in high school and I was the only girl on the team. And I felt like, I had to prove myself. And, I eventually did get to be team captain. So I was very proud of that. But like, I think, that really does suck. But I think it can be good in some ways because like it does always push you to be better. But, maybe not for the right reasons that it should. And I think at certain times that I can't be 100% myself because I don't want people to have any kind of ammunition or reason to take me less seriously, especially, with all of the like, stereotypes about like e-girls and those types of things. I very much like don't want to play into that. So on my streams, like, or not my streams, well, also my streams, I've done a couple, but on my videos, like, I don't normally want to wear any sort of like tight clothing really or anything just because I don't want people to have any reason to say anything about me, even though that's stuff that I might normally wear in real life. So I guess it's just always having to be more conscious of the way you act, maybe more so than a man would. And just that there are also like expectations because, I'm sure that if like, I don't know, like if I were like very overweight, I'm sure I'd get like a lot of hate comments that maybe a man wouldn't get. So just like being cognizant of all of those things, it's like it seems like there's a much more narrow scope that you have to kind of act within. And like hopefully that will change going forward. And it definitely has changed already, like the expectations of women in society as a whole. This is a really long tangent, but overall though, I would say it's been like a really positive experience either way. I think, most people don't treat me any differently than they would a man. And again, of course, like the age does play a factor, but like I try to make sure, especially because I'm younger than most people on here, that pretty much everything I say is backed by data or math. And I usually don't give like, I try not to give so many hard statements about what will happen in the future. More so just giving people information that they can like do with what they will, or sometimes I will give my opinion. But I try to make sure that things are just backed by data when I can. That was really long. I'm sorry.
No. I'm just seeing if I want to respond to any of that. Or ask any follow-up questions. No. I thank you for sharing your opinion. It's great to hear. I love hearing honest opinions about this stuff, and I'm very interested in your experience and other people's experiences. Do you find that there have been any positives about being a female in this space in terms of your identity, or do you find like it's mostly been either? It sounds like mostly you think it's a neutral, like it doesn't matter. Like mostly people just treat you as they would any other human being and listen to you. But you find that there's some negative, both in terms of maybe getting unwanted sexual attention or unwanted people wanting to get your number or date you or something like that from people in this space that I don't have to deal with as much. The one thing we were talking about before is my male fans, I'm not like worried that they're gonna step over, some of them might, but step over some sort of like sexual boundary like that. Whereas like a female with maybe mostly male fans, because it's a mostly male dominated space, that would be something that would come up more and you'd have to like navigate. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So I guess, if you want to respond to that at all or any, positives, do you feel like you get treated more respectfully at all in any space, or there's more, by people due to sex or anything like that? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I will say that I'm sure there are at least one or two of your fans who are pining after you. I'm sure. But it's like a dual-ended, like, so I definitely do get some DMs on Instagram actually that are kind of uncomfortable. People like in person are usually very polite. They might be more polite to me than they would, a man. Yeah. He gave me an Oreo one time at locals, so maybe that's because I'm a woman. Who knows? But he was giving them to everyone, actually, to be fair. But a lot of times there's like people will be nice to you, and then if they kind of make a pass at you or something and you deny them, they will then not be nice anymore. Or sometimes people will be nice but a little bit dismissive, or like you know, if I go with one of my male friends to a locals or something, they're like, they'll assume that I'm just there because I'm being dragged along or that type of thing, even if I'm like the one dragging them along. So, you know, that's kind of a concern there. Online, I think you'll have, I mean, I'm sure like there are going to be people who will like me more because I'm a woman, and there are going to be people who will like me less than I'm a woman, or who will think I'm a clout chaser. I've had a comment or two like that, which is very interesting to me. But you were saying earlier, you know, before we started this, that you have some fans who like love you, and then they also like they view you as a hero, but they also have to have a villain. It's these people who are really passionate, and they're either going to love you or hate you. And
Yeah.
I, you know, everyone has that, and maybe I just have a few more people who have a very strong opinion one way or the other about me, than maybe like, you know, all else equal, a male who is saying the exact same things about me. Obviously, it depends on like the content of your channel. If it were like, you know, really contentious stuff, you might have more people who feel really strongly. But yeah, I don't think like there's a net positive, or negative, aside from like a few select individuals being a little creepy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope it's obvious to everyone here the way that you talk about ideas, articulate ideas, and think through things live on the fly like this demonstrates intellect, regardless of sexual orientation. And I, you know, can respect, you know, you and listen to you and be interested in your, you know, opinions and those types of things. But you know, the reality is it's crazy. I mean, the amount of the comments and the hate, and I mean, I have people out there who I just, you know, I've had to block from my channel, and I see them in other people's chats, like just crapping on me in other people's live streams, saying negative, like when the conversation has nothing to do with me, just spending time out of their day trying to like turn other people against me, these types of things. So I will tell you, it exists everywhere. And it, you know, it absolutely could be, you know, because of your sex or not your sex. And that can be part of what's hard is, you know, it's hard to know where a person's coming from, or, you know, why a person, just as you were saying before, you know, is kind of creating you into some sort of villain of the community. And then other people are looking at you as some sort of hero of the community, you know, these types of mentalities. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
overall, it's like it's not so bad. You know, everyone has people who hate them. I don't think, you know, I'm like that contentious overall. Also, what you were saying is definitely true. I remember I was doing a live stream with Nostalgianomics the other week, and we had a guy in the chat trying to get us to talk about you, uh,
Yeah.
which was just like really surprising, and a bit weird. So it's interesting to see people. I mean, people like drama, I guess. It's interesting though to see that like in a space like this, people are also looking for drama. Maybe it's because it's related to money though, and people get really, really emotional when it comes to money. I don't know if you think that's part of it, but I do think it's like an interesting thing to talk about. And obviously, you know, you are a therapist, so I'm sure you understand the psychology of all of this better than I do.
Yeah, it's been a learning experience, but it's been eye-opening for sure. But yeah, um, if anyone has any questions, you know, um, go for it. Let's see what we got here. I think there were some questions asked before. Um,
Someone says I probably wouldn't like Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. Guys get too excited whenever they saw a girl, and some would even harass them for trades. I used to go to locals, you know, probably like 8 years ago, you know, around then, before and after that period. And like, it was like uncomfortable sometimes. But I was also just like a socially awkward person. But like, it wasn't like the worst thing ever. It wasn't so bad that I wouldn't want to go. But I do think that, you know, there are probably a lot more women who like these things than who really want to go to these events, for that reason. And I do think that's like very fair. So I think though that more and more women are like coming out actively to participate.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just people trying to like respect each other's boundaries and understanding that you know, people want space and it's hard. I mean, listen, these things are difficult to navigate, and I'm empathetic to all sides sometimes. So it can be very awkward to witness and watch. Part of me is happy to be kind of older and out of the dating range. But,
I mean, you're in your 30s. I don't think that's quite out of it yet. But
well,
everyone, you were saying 33. Everyone seems to be between the ages of 33 and 31. Like who has a YouTube channel about this, which is very funny to me. I guess that's just like the specific age that you would have been when Pokemon first came out. It just like the timing is there. Like you'd be like 7 or something. So that's funny to me. But some people have started asking a couple of questions.
Mason just agreeing, saying that he's had several women say they wish they felt like they could play or collect more to him at his LGS, at his store. But they just feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think one of the worst things is that trading is like, ever since I was a kid, it was like one of my favorite things about the hobby, but it's become so hard to trade. Like not even just being a woman, it's just like gotten like the culture around trading, I feel like has gotten a little toxic. Because it's always like about that dollar amount, and it's fair to want to get a good value. But the same people who are like obsessively checking TCG player prices are the same people who probably also want to get the upper hand in the trade. And so theoretically, it would make trades more even, but the people who use TCG player probably already have more knowledge than the person who doesn't think to check TCG player. So like when that happens, there's just probably a more uneven trade there than there would be otherwise. And it's also just really tedious dealing with people who are like always trying to get like a few bucks out of you when you're trading. So it's been harder to trade since 2020, I feel like, in particular. Someone says, what objective factors make a Pokemon set good for buying and holding, especially for modern, where most of them seem based on speculation and subjectivity? I don't know what you have to say on that. Do you have any thoughts?
Where's the question?
It's one of the most recent ones. It should still be on the screen if you're at the very bottom.
Say it again. I'm sorry. 8 and M's question?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What objective factors make a Pokemon set good for buying and holding, especially for modern, where most seem based on speculation and subjectivity? For me, the honest answer is I tend to buy a little bit of everything. I buy a little bit heavier when I see stuff go really low, like $72, or like really, really popular sets like Evolving Skies go to like 90. Like I would like when really popular sets like Evolving Skies, I would like to buy in like the $90 to $100 range. And your sort of less popular sets, I'd love to buy at like 70 to 80. That's not always going to happen. That's not always going to be the case. I tend to like to buy reprinted like Sun and Moon items. So like when they reprinted like the Sun and Moon base ETB, I picked up, some of those, right after they reprint items when they go down. Or if I ever hear people be like Fusion Strike's a good example. I think people are irrationally negative on Fusion Strike. I actually think it's quite good with quite strong Pokemon and good playability. It just makes it's been completely, overlooked. It doesn't make any sense. It's perfectly fine set, if not above average. So, things like that. If I can get them at really good prices. Again, I buy a little bit of everything. I don't look at these markets and I think, oh my God, I know exactly which one I'm just going to go heavy into that, and I do think that sometimes people are looking for that sort of magical answer that doesn't really exist. I don't have, unfortunately, any insider information, on print runs. But people have systems like Bulba Squad has a spider system, and there are ways to try to break down, okay, how many chase cards, how well balanced is the set, what's the expected value, how early are we in its cycle? How likely is it going to get a reprint? How many sets have come out since then? I think all that stuff is reasonable to factor in. But again, it is all there is speculative elements of all of that. There isn't anything definitive. So what do you think?
So when we're trying to talk about subjective or objective, my mistake, it gets hard because we don't have exact knowledge of, say, any type of quantities or that type of thing. We know when reprints happen. So I would say supply can be more objective, maybe not on an absolute scale, but you can be more objective relative. You have to be like paying a lot of attention to reprints and that type of thing. And you have to kind of be able to guesstimate how large those reprints are. But for example, if you know a set was never reprinted versus one that was reprinted once or twice, most likely that one has a smaller supply, which is always good. You know, we always like to see a smaller supply. And then we can say maybe that expected value can be relatively objective in that like it's an actual metric. So it depends on how you measure it and like your methodology and how precise you are. Obviously, like you can estimate incorrectly. But, you know, when you're using like high pull rate data and current prices, that can be very, very helpful. It does fluctuate over time, of course. So really what you have to work with is you can guess the supply. Now, this depends also if it's been out for, you know, how long. If it's over 2 years, probably won't be reprinted. So that's probably more set in stone. You at least know that there probably won't ever be more supply of it. And then once, you know, you start getting out past a year, past 2 years, the prices start to stabilize a lot more. You know, they might continue to trend up or down, but like it's not going to be those rapid fluctuations you see in the first few months when a set comes out. So that goes into the expected value aspect. And of course, you do know what Pokemon and cards are in the set. So I guess that could be considered objective. And then it's really combining those with a lot of subjective things to try to get the best analysis you can. And I think it's important to remember the things that you can kind of get numbers for, you know, you can estimate rather than guesstimating and just saying like, I don't think there's that much of this. You can say you don't think there's that much, but if you haven't done the math, you know, I don't think that's quite as like valid of a method. Or if you think the expected value is high because maybe there's 1 or 2 expensive chase cards, but really they're very, very hard to pull. So the expected value hardly moves at all. Like the expected value hardly moves at all when there's a $300 card, but a 1 in 1,000 chance of pulling it. That might move the expected value of the box by like $1 or something. So it's really, another part also could be considered maybe like standard deviation of the box. This definitely starts to vary more, but like certain sets are very top heavy, you know, where there's like 1 or 2 cards you really, really want. So like Vivid Voltage, you know, you want that Pikachu, Champion's Path, the Charizards. And if you don't pull those, you're kind of out of luck. So that can also play a role as well. You know, some people do like the thrill of the hunt, but also in general, I personally would prefer to own a box that has a lot of good cards in it. You know, I don't know what you think of that, but.
Yeah, it's just hard to predict. I agree with everything you said. I think that's the best you can do. But at the end of the day, I don't feel confident. And I think that's where I tend to push back. Listen, it's tough on YouTube, right? Like if you have a modern Pokemon channel and you're trying to break through right now, right? Like, and you come on and you say, well, there's nothing we can really know for sure, you know, and I don't really know what you guys should do, you know, and I'm not confident and these types of things, it's really tough. You know, what's going to sell a lot better and what's going to be a lot better is saying, you will definitely make money. You can certainly expect 10 to 20% returns every year, and it'll probably even double and triple in a few years. You know, that's going to sell a lot better. And the issue, right, is that a lot of those channels blew up and then they were run out of the hobby because the market tanked and they were right about everything while it was going up. And then they were immediately wrong about everything depending on their timing, right? Because it's sort of luck, right? Really, you're just picking things, and in one period you're lucky and then in another period you're unlucky, versus actually talking about what you can know and what you can't know and really trying to stick to that. And that's why I really appreciate your channel from what I've seen. You know, it's sort of, no, it's really saying like, and I mean, there are times when, and in this conversation earlier on, maybe where I push back a little bit on some of the language, because I think that there are historical examples where that isn't the case. And maybe it's not quite as sure of a thing, as you presented, but, the vast majority of it, it's like very reasonable. It's reasonable opinions, really good data. And I think it's hard, but I think if you continue to do that over time, you can grow a more appreciative, loyal following that isn't just there for like the stonks. And it's like worth it to do that. And it's so much better for the community. Like it's so much better for people who like put a lot of effort into numbers and actually care. Rather than, there's so many people who are just focused on their own success and their own growth. And, and that's what is frustrating when you're sort of putting that, you're willing to kind of say what it takes to grow.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think also like part of the temptation is when you say that, like when you sound so confident and can say these like concrete numbers that are also like really exciting numbers, it sounds like you know more than someone who says, I don't know. But I feel like this is like kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know everything, and that there are a lot of things that like, especially in this like subjective and like when we're trying to predict the future and investing and speculating, that you can't know. I think that, it makes you like a lot more cautious. But yeah, I think it is like good to have like your integrity, and not that people who make those videos don't have integrity or anything like that, but like I want to make these videos that like I feel like are more true to me, because I just like, this is just kind of what I like to do. And I really, I like to do kind of sometimes more like thought experiment things. Like this is something I've like really loved to do with like actual stocks as well. But like I'll do like, I did like a 27-minute video or something, just going back and talking about like the prices of these vintage packs and how they've behaved, but like kind of imagining if we were there back in the day, and trying to show why, like, yes, there were these crazy high returns, but maybe it's not like so much better than you would demand based on that level of risk. And I think talking about those things can be helpful because it gets people like thinking more rather than just giving like the concrete numbers. Even though like I think those maybe are definitely a bit less popular, but I think that they're very, very interesting, at least to me, because I think the more you do those things, the more you realize like how nuanced things really are. They can't give you like, they're not going to give you answers to things that like to tell you what you should be buying, but they can give you this like other perspective, which I think is like really interesting. And I like making those videos because I don't think I see like a lot of people doing that. I see people comparing Pokemon returns to the stock market, but like in a way that's not like, in my opinion, I feel bad saying this, but I don't think it's the most nuanced. And it's not really talking about the actual possible outcomes rather than what happened. We're in a multiverse, but like really so many things could have happened. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think it's really important to be cautious when comparing Pokemon cards to the stock market in particular.
Yeah, I mean, the issue right now with comparing the Pokemon cards to the stock market straight up, there are two issues. One is it doesn't take into account risk reward. It doesn't take into account risk. And understanding that like if you bought Pokemon cards, it was a much bigger risk than buying the stock market. And so even though you did better, it could have gone a lot worse. And there were a lot of other 90s collectibles or other sorts of things you could have bought back then that were also very popular that are worth zero right now. So, it's a winner's fallacy. It's like when you look at like SM Pratt, like there were a lot of people just like SM Pratt who were buying Beanie Babies who were saying the exact same thing that SM Pratt thought, but about Beanie Babies. And they all ended up failing miserably, or at least not doing nearly as well. And so you have to understand that like winners can seem, and this is my case too, like people think that I'm smarter or more of a genius. There are probably some people out there than I actually am because I made a lot of money doing this, but a lot of it was luck, right? So it's, now a lot of it is knowledge and hard work and skill and time and all these types of things, but there's so many other really knowledgeable, skilled people who did other things and just weren't as lucky as me and didn't make as much. And that's always going to be the case with investing in all of these areas, right? So that's the first issue, is not understanding risk. The second issue is that almost all of the growth has happened in the last year to 2 years. And so it's just a very weird thing to compare. Like, let's look at the last 10 years of this versus that, when for the first 9 years, if you had been in Pokemon, you would have been way, way underperforming the market. And then if you had just held that 1 year, all of a sudden you were way outperforming. And that just shows the level of risk and unpredictability in pop culture collectibles. And anyone banking that that's ever going to happen again is and when I say banking, I mean banking. Like, it's definitely going to happen again. Not that it's possible or could, but it's like, it's definitely going to happen again. Every 10 years, we're going to see a period like that. I hope it happens. I hope, and there are reasons why it could. The demographics of Pokemon, multiple generations, the popularity of the franchise. But again, those are the issues. Those are the problems with those direct comparisons. When you don't include that info, both the risk and then the odd sort of movements, and the fact that you're like, if you can skew data, anyone can put out data, but it's how you interpret the data that matters. And that's the danger of putting out data with an interpretation that Pokemon has been some sort of, and I'm seeing people use Pokemon to say collectibles and pop culture collectibles are a better, for sure, investment, than traditional investments. And I just think that that's very unproven, and the vast majority of the time it doesn't work out, even if it will work out in Pokemon. So
like everything 100%, yes, like snaps to that. So I think that so when I was talking about this video, I think this was like one of my better videos. It's like one of the least viewed ones recently, but like when we're talking about this, we can even there is a way to quantify like how much risk matters and how much more you should expect. So like something I was talking about is like the required rate of return. So required rate of return for investing in a stock, it varies depending on a lot of things, and there are different ways to calculate it. But with Pokemon, we can't use maybe some of the more traditional methods, which are things like WACC, which is like weighted average cost of capital. That doesn't really matter because one, they don't apply to Pokemon, and it's just not worth getting into that. But a lot of times, what it really comes down to is the risk. And so for something like Pokemon, your required rate of return should be so much higher because, like you were saying, it is so risky. Pokemon was not the only collectible or toy to exist in 1999. If you were buying Pokemon as an investment, you were probably buying things like Beanie Babies or something like that as well. And if you didn't, it's really just by chance that you ended up with it, most likely. There are very few people who did that. If they did, that doesn't make them a gigabrain investor, in my opinion. They made a choice that was very, very lucky. But theoretically, let's say you invest in 100 toys from back then. How many of those are still around? I kind of want to make a whole video about Beanie Babies because I think it'll be such a good case study. But if you're doing that, you're going to have a lot of losers. So your winners need to be big winners. So a typical required rate of return could be 7 to 12% for a company. But then when it's things that are high risk, so a startup maybe would be 14% or 15% or something. For Pokemon, when it's brand new in 1999, it has no track record. So you should have a really high required rate of return, something like 15%, which is what I used in that video. And when you do that and you actually calculate $3.99 times, that compounding 15%, the amount that it would have to be worth in 2022 is so high. It's over over $150, I think. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But for that to be worth it, that's how much it would have to be. And like you were saying, a lot of this growth just happened. This is an anomaly with what's happened. But even now, after that's happened, it's not it's outperforming what we would demand based off of the risk, what we should demand based off of the risk by that much. You can compare it to actual companies that didn't have the same percentage return, but compared to what their risk is and the required rate of return you would expect, they relatively did better because maybe the difference between the required rate of return and the actual rate was more than the percentage difference for Pokemon. So I think this is a great way to, like, it's an interesting framework. Trying to apply these actual like investing concepts is something I like to do. And of course, you've got to be careful because you can draw like false equivalencies. But I think in this way, trying to quantify risk is something that's very interesting, and just the impact that it should have when you're buying things like this. So
yeah, I'm very interested. Where did you pull your number for quantifying risk for Pokemon? Did you pull it as like, is this like a general like collectibles number that you got from somewhere, or where did that percentage come from? Because that's super interesting, because that's the part that feels, because I imagine, for growth stocks, what are we looking at? Hoping for like 10 to 12% maybe, and for maybe more safer, stocks, we're looking at like 4 to 8%, or 5 to 8%, or somewhere in there. Like those are pretty common investment things that might be thrown out. But how about like, where do you put Pokemon as a percentage, and how did you come up with that?
Well, it definitely depends on like when we're talking about. I think that like that percentage I would say is lower now than it was in 1999. I think it's still very high and higher than any company in the S&P 500, I think. Yep. But I said for 1999, I said 15%. And this isn't like, a hard and fast rule. Like this isn't a hard and fast number, but this is like, if I were in 1999, this is probably the number that I would have chosen. And you can maybe say like 14, 16. When you start getting above that, like the compounding effects start to be crazy. So that's why you couldn't say like a 25% required rate of return, because like our payout period is so far in the future that would just end up being an insane number. Compounding, yes, it would just be ridiculous.
It's like, I need this to go from 100 to 1 million. Before
it's like crazy. It's like Bitcoin levels. But so, I thought the startup range would be good, because what percent of startups succeed? I think that's like an interesting way to think about it, because it's like a new brand and it's like really hot in the moment. But, toys, especially when they're like aimed at children, they're so fleeting normally, right? And it was like a children's card game, squarely for children. Like Magic appeals to an older demographic, which I do think like helps with staying power, whereas Pokemon was like for children. And you have to keep capturing the children demographic to remain popular. So I thought 15% would be fair, which is like quite a high rate. But you could apply like 14 or 16 or something like that, and it would all show you that you still require like a really high price for it to have been worth it. So I just want people to like kind of see why comparing a base set booster box to like the S&P 500 or like SPY, or any of like an ETF is just like not fair. It's just so not fair when you consider the risk. If we talk about the risk, they're very, very different.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. And we'll see how it goes over the next 10 years. I mean, obviously, if Pokemon if you really see 10% modern Pokemon, one thing that I'm really looking forward to is a weird way of putting it, but my intellectually, I'm looking forward to a recession and to see what that looks like in the collectibles world as compared to the stock market and the housing market, which is crazy too. So, obviously we've seen pretty large pullbacks in the stock market, this past month, but if that deepens and widens into other areas, it'll be interesting to see, how this market does. And you and I both love data. And I think that, I'm a slave at the end of the day. I'm a slave to the data, like the data, but again, it's how you interpret the data. And that's the hard part. And of course our subjectivity, our bias you can use any sort of, it's why we have Republicans and Democrats in this country, not because people are really lying but they're taking sometimes the same data and coming up with two completely different conclusions, so it's interesting. So got a question here. What do you feel was your riskiest Pokemon investment that paid off?
Oh, that's a hard one. I like to think that like, when I think of risk, a lot of times like the closer I'm paying to market price or like to fair value, which are not the same thing, the riskier I think it is. there have also been things I bought that were like really unpopular at the time. So my first ever trading card investment was actually in Yu-Gi-Oh. I bought these like Legendary Collection Yu-Gi's World boxes on clearance from Walmart.com for $20 each. And I remember buying these, and my dad was like, "Ava, are you sure that's not a waste of money?" And I bought like 3 of them, so it was like $60. But I was like 15 or something at the time, 16, and they're now worth maybe like $400. But part of why that was risky is like it was my really first time buying something with the intent to keep it sealed, and like I don't think my knowledge was anywhere near it was today. And like Yu-Gi-Oh, like it was on clearance, people didn't want it. And then another one would be the XY Premium Trainer Collection from 2017. I don't know if you know that, but it's got a bunch of different promos. It had an MSRP of $100, which is quite expensive for what it is, because it's just like, I think it might be like 17 promos, and then like a few packs. So the value is like all in those promos. But I bought a few of those for $50 each when they were on sale, and like nobody wanted them. And then this was actually like pretty soon before the bubble, and then they went up to like $400 very quickly. But I think sometimes, maybe not the actual risk, but the feeling when you're buying something that nobody else believes in, it's, you have to be much more confident in that, I think. And then other risky things, I don't know, I felt pretty crazy paying like $140 for a like Unbroken Bonds booster box at the end of 2019. But obviously that worked out. Usually like I don't want to pay that close to MSRP for a booster box if I can help it. But it just seemed like the right time, because it was about to, it was like the end of the Sun and Moon era, and just felt right. But it ended up working out. So yeah, I'm trying to think of like actually risky things. If something's super risky, I probably don't want to like buy it. In terms of Pokemon cards, like I don't buy a lot of singles hoping for like a long-term return, which I know we talked about. And it's definitely something that can work. But yeah, what about you?
I almost want to answer it with just like Pokemon cards. Because I really think that it was all very risky what I did to some extent, even though the prices I was paying were so much lower. And I, had my theories and thesis about the size of the Pokemon card. I've talked about this endlessly. My first 100 videos are me just talking to camera, explaining all of my thoughts and, everything. So, it's all there for people who maybe are new to my channel.
It's on the permanent record.
Yeah. But specifically, there were things that I bought that people were directly that some of the people who had been in the hobby longer, who were talking about giving sort of like financial opinions, were saying won't go up, are not good things. They're not old enough, these types of things. There was a lot of WotC is the only thing that you should buy type of mentality. WotC, and then maybe some like niche Japanese kind of promos was the prevailing message, and understandably, because that's the only thing that ever had any value. Frankly, it's the only thing that had any value, and nobody knew what was going to happen. But so I would say Topsoon was a really good example. I was buying most of it that was graded for a while because the pop reports were so low, and that it was pre some of the Bandai, the Prism, and then into the middle generations, I bought thousands of level X cards, primes, the really cool, the gold border secret rares from some of those really great plasma sets, cards that I just really liked. And I thought were incredibly rare, even as compared to WotC in terms of being able to find them as set cards, and yet we're quite a bit cheaper. And I always had the theory that I thought Pokemon would go up, and I thought more generations would join and be interested in like the middle generations, and that there was just very little supply from those generations. I was very, I was willing to take a big risk. I was telling my family that I think that I was going to be a millionaire, that I thought I'd be a millionaire off this stuff, half joking, but half like, you guys think I'm crazy, but like the number, like it's so cheap and it's so rare. There's like 5 of these in the world and I can buy them for $50 or $12 or $15. And it just felt Pokemon is the biggest pop culture company in the world. And these cards are the key collectible from it. How are these things so cheap? It just didn't, it didn't make sense to me. So, so just taking that plunge. And then during the height, I took a lot of risky, I guess, plunges into Marvel, into Harry Potter, into, fairly risky, into Batman, Superman cards, buying like Civil War, Horrors of War, 1940s, 1950s cards, 1890 playing cards, lots of things. Some have done really well. Others are the exact same price that I paid for them. Most of them have gone up for some considerably. Yeah. So, it's all risky, but, at the end of the day, and it goes back to the thing I said in the beginning, like I'm doing this, like so much of this is about fun for me that like I'm willing to make quite a bit less money than I would somewhere else potentially for the amount of fun and enjoyment that I'm having. And when you buy these things and you do this type of hobby, the fact that you could even make money having this much fun versus doing a hobby where you'd be like theoretically spending money, like most hobbies to have fun, it's a pretty sweet deal. And I just do not, I think that there's upside, but I'm, in 2018, I was so bullish. And now I'm sort of like, I'm not really sure. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that these things will continue to grow and go up in value and become more popular, and that more and more people will enjoy and get into the hobby. But I'm not banking on anything personally.
Yeah, no, for sure. Also, I'm not hopeful that anyone loses money or is in a difficult financial situation, but I am hopeful for a recession just for general investing purposes.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be in a good position for that.
Consolidation periods are important for markets. It's where you flush out a lot of the irrational exuberance, and then comes the irrational pessimism. And that's when people are irrationally pessimistic, that's when you buy. So the whole first year of my channel was trying to teach that lesson over and over and over again during the bubble in Pokemon.
Yeah. I think also people are like, oh my God, the market has crashed. We've seen our total correction. Yeah. I don't think that's true, to be honest. I think that a lot of things are going to continue to go down. This is just my opinion. Yeah. And it's like, I would so much rather be conservative than not, because really it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm so much more impressed by the person who doesn't lose as much money as other people do than the person who's making more money than other people do, right? Because being risk savvy, I think, is just like really important. And that's kind of what's going to help you like outperform in the long run. It's easy to make money when everyone is, but like where you start to see those like outpacing returns is when you start to lose less than other people, because that's where you get your advantage. And then you can perform the same or even a little bit worse in a bull market. But if you can outperform in the bear market, then I think you'll definitely end up better in the long run.
ARK Invest, Berkshire Hathaway. We shall see. But I think that my response to that is that I do think that there are smart, it's sort of the bulls and bears get, but the pigs get phrase. It's like there are people who know what they're doing who are both generally very cautious and risk averse. And then people who take lots and lots of very risky things, but are very calculated because the upside is so huge. Think of angel investors in like tech startups, or something like that, but again, it goes back to what we're talking about here, which is that if you're taking a 90% failure risk, you need to 1,000x your money probably, what I mean? And that's what
you need to be taking like 100 of those risks. So like, angel investors, like these are people with a lot of money, they are investing in more than just like that one company. And so that's why they can like tolerate that, because they buy like so many that helps minimize the risk of like that one failure. And again, like you're saying, they have to have a really, really high expected like return. Otherwise, on average over time, they would lose money on those investments. And like you were saying, you can take really risky investments, but if you know what you're doing, I don't think the risk is the same as like if I were to pick a random startup, the risk, like, it would be so much stupider for me to do that than like your experience, like angel investor or that type of thing, because it's like not my expertise. If it's your expertise, that's pretty different, because at a certain point, like, skill does help to like reduce risk, not like in an absolute sense, but in a like you're better at picking and choosing and you can see those opportunities better. I think you can win in both. You can win by outperforming a bull market, and you can win by outperforming a bear market, or you can do both if you're like amazing. I think either are good, but I just think I see like a lot of people who make some money and get really excited and double down, and then obviously things can't always go up, and it's just sad to see people lose a lot of money. So I always, want to caution people that things might continue to go down, and you should be prepared if they do. I don't think it's the worst thing if they do, even if you're buying now, because you can just dollar cost average. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that can be a good thing, but being mindful.
Really, there are items that you cannot buy a lot of all at once.
Yeah.
And so those are items that if you want to complete these large sets or own a bunch of these rarer cards or more difficult cards to find, like buying over the next 3-4 years, even if the market goes down at some point during it, is probably not a bad decision overall. Now there are going to be other items that are maybe always very, very easy to get. Those are the items that I would probably look for the best deals. Like, and the way that I view these things is the better the card, and this is common sense, but the better the card, the closer I'm actually willing to pay market, or even at sometimes I pay above market. So I paid above market on certain items. I paid the highest price ever on certain items in the past. Now those are old prices, but at the time I paid the highest price ever for certain items because I was very confident in them and view them as extremely undervalued, and they just never come up on market, right? The exact opposite of that are cards that I'm seeing literally every day, all day. Those are cards that and hopefully that's common sense to people, but that I'm going to be the most patient on, the most, but it's there. Things can dry up. It's amazing how quickly taste can change, and how cards that seem endless can all of a sudden disappear.
Oh, yeah.
Or fully disappear, based on huge spikes of demand or buyouts. So it's a quick moving market, and there's not a lot of some of these cards graded. I mean, when you're talking about 200, 100, 500, like, and that card's only $100, $50, $150. It's just doesn't take that much money market cap to move something like that, but very difficult to predict, really impossible.
I think also, like, there are certain things you want to buy slowly. And also, like, when we're talking about investing in stocks, a lot of times what we'll do is we don't buy like a full position a lot of times in the thing that we want to buy immediately. And because if it goes up, we still made money, right? There's no downside there. But if it goes down, we can buy more. So I think one thing I would caution a lot of people, if you're planning on buying a multitude of something, this does depend what it is, but I think for singles, this definitely would apply well, is to just, even if there is a large supply available right now, and you could buy the maximum amount you want, I would say hold off and don't buy everything all at once, because if it continues to go down, you can buy more. To me, that's usually like a good thing. When we're making an investment and like it goes down a little bit, we can buy some more. And if it goes up, then there's no problem there. You made money. Maybe you didn't make the full amount, but I think over time that practice like is pretty helpful. And yeah, especially like if you're buying a large position of something, sometimes you don't want to shock the market, like you're saying, and like some of these cards are pretty rare. This also goes for like investing. If you're managing like $1 billion and you're talking about investing 10 or $20 million into a company with a market cap below like $100 million, you're gonna like move the market a lot, which is generally something that like in investing you don't want to do, and it can also, this doesn't apply to Pokemon, but cause some like legal concerns. But I think it's good to be surreptitious. This also relates because someone asked me why I have the legendary dogs, the Gold Star versions. And I am aware that there is someone out there who has like a bunch of these and they're like slowly selling them off to not affect the price. But like Entei is my favorite Pokemon, and I have to have these in my collection for, my master set and purposes like that. And I got them for, a well below market price. So I was happy with that. For whoever was asking that, not an investment. Wouldn't recommend picking those up unless it's something that you really need for your collection.
Yeah, it's a sad story with those. They're beautiful cards too. It's unfortunate.
I mean, it's not so bad because I got them for a lot cheaper than they would have been in like 2020 or something like that.
Yeah, I just hate people stealing and then making a lot of money and getting rewarded for that. It's frustrating to me.
Yeah.
It is what it is,
Also interesting to me that they would, I don't know, if they just stole those three, that's very interesting to me. Like, I feel like there were other cards that I would want to steal if I were going to steal those. So I don't know if they have other cards as well, but we do know they have a big stack of those.
Yeah. I mean, there was a very old video that came out. This person showing them all the cards. So someone showed a binder of hundreds of them. That's how we know. That video must be almost 10 years old, probably 8 years old now or something, maybe 7, but
yeah.
Old video now.
So there's a very high supply of them in very good condition. So relative to other gold stars, for anyone who's thinking about picking them up, maybe hoping for a return,
yeah,
I wouldn't probably.
Although I will say the prices have over time generally reflected that, because they have always been considerably lower. There was a time when they really shot up, I think in part because people just didn't know that. But I think for the most part, the prices have reflected. Now, if this guy just has endless and endless amounts, but he showed a ton, like the reality is that, he might not have that many left. And there's all sorts of stories of, because we used to see them go through like Card House all the time. And what's the connection there? So whatever. It's been talked to death. It's an unfortunate thing. I never bought those cards because I didn't want to support the person in any way who I wound up getting one in a collection, and I wound up getting another one. It's such a good deal that I couldn't pass it up. But I had a personal thing of like, you know what, I'm just gonna pass on those because I don't want to obviously it's that's a gesture because me buying or not buying that card is not gonna impact the market at all in any actual way, but more of a principle thing of like, I'm just not going to participate in that market. Gemmin asks, Zach asks, as a card collector with your whole life ahead of you, do you want to continue growing your business or set boundaries and keep it as a hobby?
Well, calling it a business is very ambitious. And I mean, if I thought of that way, or if anyone thinks of it that way, I'm very flattered. I don't know if I could call it such, but like, one thing I've talked about in one of my videos, at least, is fire. I know Catchmall Collectibles was actually mentioning this in the chat earlier, but like, I would love to not have to work a typical 9 to 5 one day, and that doesn't mean I won't do anything. But I kind of live my life in such a way that should hopefully be possible one day while I'm still pretty young. Saving money, very important. And in that case, Pokemon is something I'd love to spend more time on. And, it's a hobby, but it's also something that would be very fun to make more than just a hobby, I think. I don't know if I would really call it a proper business, but something to do that's also productive once you achieve like financial independence is always something good to have. So that in that event, I think would be Very, very cool. What about you? For you, it's definitely more of a business because you have like a very large Patreon and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a business. That part of it's a business, I guess, or, again, if you want to call it that, I'm sure referred to it as that, or generally I speak about it more as like businesses within Pokemon, people starting businesses, different type of businesses, one being a content business of sorts, and the different ways that you can run a business like that. But yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons. I certainly much more loved and respected before I decided that, maybe it would be okay for me to create something additional extra that I already wasn't doing, and be paid for my skill and expertise and time. It's funny. There's this weird sort of thing of like, you're either a guru or you're worthless, and we could just do what you do for free. And it's this very straight, it's like, guys, like, you can't, most of the people here do not know what I know. I've been doing this every day for 4 to 5 hours a day, for over 6 years. And I study all these population and data reports, and I bid on 10,000 items a month. I'm not sure how many people in the world are that engaged in the market. That also doesn't mean that I'm some genius messiah that can predict the market, which is why I only charge $10 a month and not $10,000 a month like a Gary Vee would for an hour of his time. Like, it's this very sort of strange like all or nothing thought process where you're either a messiah or you're an arrogant jerk, instead of just like, no, like, there's just some middle ground there. There's some fair, reasonable middle ground where, just like you're saying, I can create more fire for myself for all of the hours and the work that I put in and the presentations that I do for Patreon. So that's how I view all of it. But yeah, I mean, Zach famously, and Zach and I have talked about this, with Charlie and other people, kind of, does that take the fun out of it, creating a business? How do Zach Gemmin is someone who's very generous with his time and doesn't charge anyone. And, as always, I think, to my knowledge, do you know Zach Gemmin Pokemon? Have you heard that name before?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, as someone who just, is always willing to lend a hand, and, is such a great guy and great member of the community who hasn't gone down that route. But, and for him and for others, it might ruin it. I think for me, it's trying to find a balance, and I definitely, first and foremost, always, like, I want to create lots of just completely free content on YouTube, and, and meet people in person at conventions and all sorts of things that has nothing to do with like making money, just has to do with like my enjoyment of the hobby. And then there'll be like auxiliary things that I do additionally extra on top of what I was going to do anyway. And it's a work in progress because I've never done this before. I've never done anything like this before, and I'm still sorting it out and figuring out over time. I'm open to expanding. I'm also opening to contracting and closing down if I don't like something. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, I think it really depends whether it like ruins the enjoyment, whether it's like you're dependent on it for your livelihood. So
Yeah.
like, if you have other streams of income, or like, you have financial independence, you don't need to be making money off of it, like a significant amount, to survive. So I think that removes a lot of the pressure. And if you are someone who just likes that aspect of it, financial aspects of things have always appealed to me, and just make things more interesting for me. And, hopefully I'm a fairly business-minded person. So for me, it does kind of add something. It changes the experience, but I wouldn't say that it would like make it worse, unless like my life, paying rent depended on me being able to consistently turn over inventory or that type of thing in Pokemon, assuming it's like you're selling, whereas like your business, a lot of it is the Patreon, which is pretty different than imagining like, selling Pokemon cards for a living, but it could also be a combination of both. I don't know.
Yeah, I recently had a conversation with Dan because I have been thinking about leaving therapy or taking a break from it or diminishing it or doing it more kind of part-time private practice. I've been thinking about some different possibilities. And asking him, what's it like really to do it full time. And as of now, it's just, I've never been super interested in that. Like flipping is not that interesting or enjoyable to me. I'm much more prefer having the conversations, doing the analysis, and investing. I'm much more interested in buying things and holding things for a long term and picking really good things that I think are undervalued and then seeing them grow over time. I'm much more interested in, but potentially doing some angel investing as I get, older, or investing in companies, investing in startups, and maybe in the card space, maybe in other spaces. I think that's where I see myself maybe spending more time rather than just like being a seller. It's just not, it's not something that's ever really appealed to me that much, even though, it's something that I will always do some of, and I don't strongly dislike. I mean, it is fun selling something and getting that money and then being able to buy more. I like that part. but it's fundamentally, I'm looking to build a collection, and eventually one day I want to build a museum and some other sorts of things. So that's my like, I'm more into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, actually. To be the first Pokemon card museum. I don't know if there's one already. I'm guessing not. But that would be very cool. Or just collectibles like trading cards. It seems like you have quite a variety, which I think would be very cool. And I think the angel investing one, yeah, that's definitely, I don't know, that just seems like such an interesting life. And you can also really make like a big difference for a lot of, young entrepreneurs. I think something else that's like pretty interesting, for me at least, would be something like cross-border venture capital. So I've spent a lot of years studying Chinese, and I'd maybe like to be able to put it to use one day. And I think it'd be very, very cool to, be able to have relations with like other countries, and get into that space, because it's just like so much more like the Wild West. And I think there's like a lot of opportunity there, and I think it would just like yield itself very well to living a pretty interesting lifestyle. So maybe one day. I think both of those are very, very cool prospects, though.
Yeah.
Does anyone else? Someone asks, what thoughts do you have on doing what Nav did with the one-on-ones? I don't know what they're referring to there.
What are the one-on-ones, Ben? Does that mean like the one-on-one interviews on his channel? Because that's what we're conversating. Yeah. That's what we're doing right now.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I love having conversations. I love having people on, particularly new people. I also love showcasing and platforming really smart, up-and-coming creators who deserve more attention and support from everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Anyone else has any questions?
But yeah, Ben, I'm not sure if you mean like, did he do consulting or something? I don't know. Let's see. I'm sure there are a bunch more questions in the middle.
Yeah, just scrolling.
Feel free to pick any out. And if you guys want to ask them at the bottom. And also let me know if you ever need to run. I know you have school and stuff to do, so let me know.
It's okay. Don't worry. I'm mentally prepared to stay up past 10:30 tonight.
Okay.
Normally I go to bed pretty early.
If you're getting too tired, just let me know, because I can go for a long time in some of these.
It's okay. I just apologize to anyone if my rapport starts to deteriorate rapidly.
I'm not working tomorrow, so that's where I'm at. But for you, please just end it when you need.
Okay. Tomorrow's not such a bad day. Let's see. Someone earlier asked, are you taking what happened with vintage card prices and trying to apply that to futures on modern? I'm guessing that's referring to what we were talking about earlier, talking about the performance of vintage cards. And I would say, like, no. I mean, well, you can use that actually to inform it, but you should also, really what you should use it as is saying that, like, this is what it was, but that's not what it's going to be going forward. I think we know that it should be lower than that, and that it will be lower than that, for so many factors that I think we've talked about like in this stream, and that I'm sure you have talked about in like many of your other streams and your other videos in general. But I think, you know, it can be interesting to look at and then kind of try to contextualize it. So I guess that's why we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Someone else, what are some tough lessons you had to learn through experience? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Some tough lessons that I've had to learn through experience. So many from my life. I'm not sure from Pokemon, but I've had plenty of personal struggles or failures for sure. From Pokemon, I've been pretty lucky so far. It's been, maybe I learned some tough lessons before, which have helped me navigate Pokemon pretty well. But I think that something that is a continuously a struggle for me is not overspending, because I really like this stuff so much. And there have been months where I felt anxious and uncomfortable with the amount that I was spending, even though logically I'm fine and I, wasn't putting myself in any risk. I was spending outside of what I would have liked to spend because a really big card that came up that's super rare and it went at a really good deal. And I still have very mixed feelings because it's like, I'm really glad I got that. The values have gone up on these cards and they're some of my favorite cards in my collection, but also, dealt with some personal stress there of like, I really, I put myself a little bit, closer to no cash this month, for other things than maybe I felt comfortable for. And, I have a lovely girlfriend who likes to not be lavish, but go out to eat once in a while and maybe go on a vacation or two a year. And there've been a time or two where I spent a lot on a Pokemon card and I was like, I probably shouldn't have done that. I need to be like a little bit more careful the next few weeks. And it's your spending habits affects your family. Let me put it that way. So you gotta be careful with that and your income and cash and all that sort of stuff. How about you? Any mistakes? What was the question? Mistakes in Pokemon or things you've
experiences? I think what experiences. Yeah, as well. Like when I think about it in life, in the grand scheme of things, like Pokemon really no compared to like other things in life, I would say. But also related to that, I feel like I'd be in a similar boat because I would normally be the one suggesting like, let's not go out to eat and spend money. So if I had to do that a lot, I would also probably feel a little stressed out, even just irrationally. I feel like something I struggle with personally is being willing to spend money on certain things that I don't think are necessary. Obviously, I spend a lot on Pokemon cards, but like I used to really have like a lot of anxiety around spending like any amount of money, like ordering Domino's with my friends, on a Friday or something, and we were like at boarding school, so that was like our one source of joy for the week. That would stress me out, and it's like 2 for $12 pizzas, so it's like cheap. But I think this is really, really important that I've learned through watching people in my life not do this, is in like reinvesting in yourself is really, really great, but also you have to set some aside. So for example, my dad had a small business back in like 2008, and he reinvested everything into the business, which is like, it sounds so great because it's like you're not spending so lavishly on yourself and whatnot. You're reinvesting into your business. However, when you don't set more aside than he did, you're exposing yourself to a lot of risk, especially when you are working on projects like as a real estate developer that are like quite capital intensive. And this goes for any type of investing where you think you're going to have money locked up that if you had to sell prematurely could be at quite a loss. You really, really should make sure that you have plenty of savings, more than you think you'll need to be on the safe side. So I think that's maybe like the best advice I can give at the ripe old age of 21, you know?
Sure. It's tough. I mean, and everyone is in different financial positions, but yeah, ideally developing good money habits can save you a lot of pain and anxiety down the road. But the good news is, everyone here, I mean, even people in the chat who are in their 40s and 50s, there's time to start saving.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that if you don't have a lot of money saved, you're like screwed right now, because obviously you can always start saving. And I think that if you're on that path, that's always good. And also when you're saving more, you're spending less. So your expenses are lower than they otherwise would be, which I think is also good. And it means that you wouldn't have to save as much as you would if you continued to spend like everything that you had come in. And obviously that's pretty privileged to say, because a lot of times people don't have that much disposable income. And so I don't want to make it sound like it's just like so simple. It is like a very complicated and nuanced issue. And I don't want to like say that so lightly, just so everyone is aware.
For sure.
Someone asked, what is the first set that I started collecting? Oh, I don't know. I'm not like, Oh, I think they mean like when I was a kid, I'm guessing. So what was the first set that I started collecting? I think probably it was around the end of the first EX era and like beginning into like Diamond and Pearl stuff with like the level X's and whatnot. So like not the best era in my opinion. So like I feel like a lot of people have incredible nostalgia for base set, and I have like some nostalgia for a few cards from then, like the first ever holo card I pulled or whatever. But personally, like I'm not so attached to those as I am like some later sets. So for me, it's not like the first set I ever collected is the thing I'm most attached to. But obviously it's like not quite the same as base set because sets were coming out all the time, whereas base set was like the original. So for a lot of people, maybe it was more special than like my first set would have been for me. And obviously like, we still had base set cards and whatnot, when I was collecting, they were still floating around. So there was quite a variety of cards out there. So it was less about the set, I think, back then, especially like so many sets are coming out, and if you're buying a tin, you're getting like a variety of packs in there. And I feel like a lot of times kids aren't noticing the set names, like, to be honest. They're just buying the ones that they think look cool. So yeah, I think it's probably pretty different than a lot of people's experience who started like with WotC. Does anyone else?
How does the potential for a recession affect Pokemon cards? Because you can't eat Pokemon cards. That is true. Well, you could eat them, but
I don't think they give you a lot of nutritional value, unfortunately.
Very limited. Very limited.
You might burn more calories digesting them than eating them, so be cautious.
It's probably an accurate point.
It's really like if you like the taste, go for it. But like otherwise, I would pass.
Yeah, I think so recessions are often talked like as every recession's the same. And the reality is that all recessions are not the same. And recessions hit different parts of the economy in different ways and hit different parts, different people in different ways at various levels of sort of the economic ladder. And so it's going to depend on the type of recession and then also the way that the government responds. Does the government respond by printing a lot more money and flushing the system with money or doing universal basic income type of thing where everyone is now getting $1,000 and there's a lot more money distributed to lots of different economic levels in society. Generally speaking, pop culture collectibles are more heavily collected and invested in by middle, lower and middle socioeconomic people rather than uber rich, generally speaking, historically. So it's unclear is the truth. But definitely your point in that these are not, like if we have some sort of truly apocalyptic type event, these you're going to be looking at. I mean, there are going to be certain, and this is true for stocks and multinational, there are going to be certain multinational companies, certain businesses, certain things that are going to be more recession proof, more broadly recession proof than other things. And that's always been the case. And you'd think theoretically that Pokemon cards would not be in that sense.
Yeah. So I think this is actually like a really fascinating subject because, like you said, there are so many factors when we're talking about recessions, like what is causing them. So people talk fairly often about how Pokemon outperformed in 2020 when, the state of the world was terrible. But like you're saying, there were a lot of specific things going on. There was helicopter money, which I think basically up until that point was like more of a theoretical thing, which is like where the government throws money at everybody and gives them, in this case, like $1,200. And there were moratoriums on rent evictions, and those aren't things that we would probably normally see if it weren't like a pandemic, for example. So that's just one very interesting example. But it really does, like you're saying, depend on the source of it. And also the source can also affect who is affected the most. Most of the time and in general, it's going to be people who are in like middle to lower economic status being affected, which I think we all know, and, you kind of have said before. So those people are going to be the people who are collecting these lower end products. So if that happens, then those products are probably going to see more of a drop in price than, say, like higher end products. We're talking like those cards that are tens of thousands of dollars and that type of thing. Those might be more recession proof because they're in the hands of people who are better off, right? And then another factor, I think, is the time and like the length of the recession. So like a recession is like a necessary part of the market cycle, unfortunately. That's just like how it is. It's necessary. And they're not all like so horrific, right? And also, they aren't all like very long. But the longer it goes on, the more people are going to be pushed to make sacrifices. When you're struggling financially, if it's only for a couple months, that's one thing versus like if it's maybe like 2 years or something, you might be forced to sell some things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that is one potential reason that a longer thing could have more of an impact. So I think if there is like an impact, my guess is that it would be delayed a little bit. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions where people are immediately hit really hard and immediately need money for a variety of reasons. But I think that will probably hold true for the most part. And then one other thing is that it can change consumer spending habits. So this one I think is very important. So it's talking about like people's new buying habits. A lot of times during recessions, luxury goods are no longer seen as that desirable, and a lot of times they can seem distasteful. So for example, after the 2008 recession, a lot of luxury brands started downplaying the branding on their clothing for a while. So like, how we have those like Gucci suits that are like covered in the logos and whatnot, that like would not be a thing. So it was a lot more understated. And there's actually some interesting papers. Like I think I linked one in one of my videos about how in Japan, after one of their recessions, there was like a massive drop in consumer spending on luxury goods. And I think Pokemon cards fall into that category. They're not the same as, certain other goods, but they're not a necessity. And like when you think about people like posting these really expensive cards on their social media and that type of thing, that's pretty similar to people kind of like going around wearing these like heavily branded clothing and that type of thing. In my opinion, it is like a show of wealth, which is distasteful when a lot of people are struggling. So I think there are a lot of factors there, but those are some of the things that I've thought about and why I think that the Pokemon card market like will not perform the same as it did in 2020 in a typical recession.
Yes, all good points. Yeah, I have nothing more to add to that.
Someone asked, what I think of MetaZoo. So I think that's an interesting question. This is a contentious topic, I feel like. I don't own any MetaZoo cards, and for now, I don't plan to buy them. But I don't know if that means that nobody else should, but I don't have any personal interest in them. I don't love the way they look. I mean, they're cute and like silly, and I get the appeal, but I think it's really an attempt to appeal to people who grew up with like, base set and those WotC things. They like love that vintage look. And I do like hand drawn art and all of those things. And I like vintage cards. But for me, I don't love them. I don't love the way the art looks. And there's a lot of risk there. So if I were buying these, if I don't like them as a collector, the only other reason I could buy them is because I want to invest in them. But as I said earlier, I don't think you should invest in something that you don't like in terms of collectibles that you don't like and want to do as a hobby. And like I said, the risk is really high there. There have been a lot of new TCGs lately. And who knows how many of them will stand the test of time. So that's quickly my opinion on that. I'm like not educated on the MetaZoo market at all. It may be a really great investment and work out really well, but this also goes back to what I was saying about the Pokemon packs in 1999. This is another reason that can be useful. These are like untested. So for me, the like required rate of return would be very, very high on these, and I just don't feel comfortable with it. But I'm pretty sure you have some MetaZoo cards, right? So what are your thoughts on it?
I think that Steve Aoki's partnership with MetaZoo is interesting. Having influencers with connections who have really publicly said that this is their company or 50% of the company, and that I'm going to stay with this forever and make it part of their larger brand is interesting. I think that when you line up a bunch of famous people who have a lot at stake and they put their reputation and personal brand in it, and you add like a lot of the biggest companies in the industry supporting MetaZoo, like PSA, eBay, doing these partnerships now, putting eBay on the MetaZoo product. Like, this is not a normal thing. This is not any of the other Kickstarters are doing anything even close to that. Now, does that mean that people will like it? Because people have to like it, you'd think, at some point. Like, and obviously a lot of people do like it, but maybe not enough yet for this to be, a really sustainable, huge thing. And will people like it more over time? But I wouldn't underestimate the marketing power of these people and the longevity and the ability and the financial ability to weather downtimes that some of these other companies may not have, given the wealth behind these companies and the wealth and the boards and the wealth, And so even just aside from whether you like MetaZoo or not like MetaZoo, just those sort of business facts, I think really make MetaZoo stand out from the rest of the crowd at the moment. So, and then their plans, as Zach said, to, have a Netflix show and partner with everyone, Funko Pop and maybe, and having a video game maybe coming out. And, it's their goal is to make MetaZoo, when you look up like top 10 pop culture things ever, they want to be on that list. Like, this is a company that is shooting to be that big and that substantial and important. And it'll be really interesting to see if they're able to succeed at that or not. And, me personally, 7 out of 10 so far in terms of how much I like it. So pretty good. Like, I like it. I enjoy it, but it's not like, oh my God, like I like wake up like MetaZoo, like I need MetaZoo, I certainly do not have the feelings towards MetaZoo that I have to something like Pokemon that I've been engaged with my whole life, or for that matter, Batman, Superman, Star Wars, Marvel, like all of these other franchises have been there my whole life. MetaZoo is some cool new cards that I like and enjoy, and it's interesting to see where they go with it. Now, if they make a Netflix show and a video game and I like it and I like the lore and I like the stories and I like the broader world, I could see myself getting more into it because I like that stuff. I like stories and I like monsters and I like cryptids and I like lore. So I could see myself getting into that if it was done in a way that I liked, but that's just my personal subjective, and everyone's going to have their own preferences, but that's where I feel like it's at right now. But yeah, people hate it. It's or
I
love
don't
it.
have any hatred towards it. And I was actually talking about a friend with friend about this.
Jake says 7 out of 10 of your investment dollars need to be in MetaZoo. Yeah, that's what I mean.
What do you mean 10 out of 10? No, I don't hate it though. Like people do whatever they want. I'm not gonna get like upset about what other people do. And I was actually talking to a friend about this earlier, and I was saying that I could see it if they could actually start like a media franchise, like an actual like empire type of thing, where they have like the variety of media sources. And I think, is the TV show supposed to be a kids show? Because if they can get kids, like right now it's like all adults, and that's not very promising to me, because it's a lot of adults who are buying it who feel 7 out of 10 about it. Whereas if you can get kids who feel 10 out of 10 about it, and you can keep getting kids who feel 10 out of 10 about it, that's when you start to see like that longevity. And I think that if they can like pull that off with their video game and show, maybe I would consider buying in. I don't need to like get these crazy returns like right off the bat. I don't need to be, one of the first people in. But like if it seems like they'll actually be around for a while, or maybe even in a few years, and if they can make even me like I'm open to it. If they can make me care about the characters like through the show, I think it's good to like find a way to make people like fall in love with the cards and the characters on them. So a show I think would be really, really powerful for that, in a game, obviously. So, I'm hoping that they can really make it, because I think that the theme of like, the lore and the cryptids is like really, really cool. But I just need some people to feel like 10 out of 10 about it. And also, it seems like they're already like so expensive. They were so expensive from the beginning.
The biggest problem in MetaZoo is how expensive it already is when we look at it from a purely investment perspective. Like, and like it went up so much so fast. And this is one of the key lessons in investing, is that people price in future. Okay. And so when you're looking at a market, if everyone in that market thinks, oh my gosh, this is going to be like the next big thing, it already is the big thing, and it's already selling as the big thing. So there's a lot of like, I always laughed at Pokemon when everyone's like, the 25th anniversary is going to like take us. It's like, that's already priced in. Everyone knows the 25th anniversary is coming. Everyone's already buying like the 25th anniversary is coming. It's people price in what they expect to happen. So if you look at the market and you think people are overly positive, then you should think the market's probably overpriced. If you look at the market, you think people are overly negative on the future, then you should think it's undervalued. For me, the people that are buying MetaZoo are way over irrationally exuberant on MetaZoo. The people who are paying 30, 60,000, 10,000, thinking that it's going to definitely go to 100,000 or 200,000, it's wild. Now, people who are buying like $80, $100 new booster boxes, and maybe it'll speculate it might go up a little bit, like that's a lot more reasonable, and maybe the potential return on investment merits some of that, like a little bit, particularly if you have the money. I don't hate that. I don't think there's any big problem with any of that. But for me, and I've been very clear on this, MetaZoo is not an investment. It's just something, it's a new card game that I'm enjoying, I'm learning, I'm engaging in. And I hope it succeeds, because I like the idea. I like the concept. I hope they do a good job. I hope there's another cool game for me to enjoy. But let's not misunderstand what this is, right? Star Wars, Pokemon, Marvel, these things are phenomenons that affected a generation or multiple generations, where every single person knew what that was. No, that is not the case for MetaZoo yet. So you should not be paying prices for something that has not yet achieved that, when you're paying much higher prices for those things than anything there, any like Star Wars memorabilia or Pokemon card that came out at around the time of its release never sold for that much. The reason these are selling for so much is people are comparing it to Pokemon, thinking it might be as big as Pokemon, and yet are already paying the prices that they should be paying if it's successful in 20 years. Like literally, like that's literally what's happening. So it's tough. Now, the one counter argument is the manufactured rarity of these things, because obviously they're not going to be we're not going to have a lot of attrition because everyone's going to keep this stuff in like mint condition. But the manufactured rarity and the fact that there's so much less of this, even than like an alpha printing, like compared to Kickstarter and certainly compared to base set first edition Pokemon, there is some upside there. But I just wish people could just enjoy MetaZoo. Just like have fun, enjoy it. It's fun. I like it. And if you think it sucks, all the power to you. I'm not trying to change anyone's mind. It's great. I think you yelling it sucks all the time is pretty obnoxious for the people who like it. And it's not obnoxious to me. It doesn't affect me, but it definitely, people who like are really passionate about it, I'm sure it's obnoxious and annoying. And for the creator and other people who work there, it's the same thing with people who crap on my channel or crap on, whoever. It's like, stop, like, just let people enjoy what they enjoy. But it's completely reasonable to then say, I don't get it. I don't see it. Like that to me is within the bounds, but so that's where I'm at with that stuff. But whatever, people are where they're at. People are pretty dug in.
Yeah. One thing I feel like it's like the barriers to actually like play the game are pretty high, because most trading card games people like actually want to play. I mean, people do like to play Pokemon, but like not as many. And I say someone who used to play the card game and whatnot, but like I think a lot of times the new games rely a lot more on that playability, but for MetaZoo, it's like seems like that's going to be very difficult to make happen organically.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, it reminds me so much of like all of these coins now. After Bitcoin, blew up and Ethereum and all those, like anything is just like going to the moon. And not that some of these don't have good fundamentals, but people are paying the prices. Yes. Like they've already made a massive impact on the world. And just also some of them are like ridiculous, like MILF coin. And it's just, I mean, it's pretty funny. But, I'm not saying that MetaZoo is like bottom tier, like MILF coin or whatever. There are many Kickstarters that maybe are, but, MetaZoo still like, it hasn't proven itself. So I don't think that it should be trading or selling like it has. And I think that's a good point you made. But maybe one day it'll deserve those prices. So who knows?
Yeah. Hard to know. Where I don't feel confident, but it's also like I'm not super immersed in it, is the lore. Like why this over, like, because they don't own Bigfoot. Like these characters have a lot, but they don't own that. They're using that and creating a world around it, which I think is smart. But that's where I'm sort of at, like, like Star Wars is freaking like amazing. And, now, yes, it's like Shakespearean story. I mean, it's the same types of stories, good versus evil and all these types of things, but it's this incredible world that was built into these incredible movies that affected a generation, it's Pokemon had this incredible concept of catching your best, like catching and then training and then being with like your best friends and fighting battles with them and going around and have like cute, adorable, and also fierce animals. Phenomenal concept, so and talk about collectability inherent and you got to catch them all. Like it's just such a great concept. So, I think MetaZoo is like a 9 or 10 out of 10 on sort of their connections right now, and maybe has a way to go, in my opinion, on some of the really bringing the concepts to fruition for me. But that's where I'm at. Yeah. So,
no, I mean,
but like it's also like you can give them time, like give them time.
The only thing is, like you were saying, these really, like these other companies built a brand, and you can only get like Luke. I've never seen Star Wars, but you can only get Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. You can only get like Charizard, Venusaur, etc. from Pokemon, and you can like obviously replicate these things. Like lots of people have made similar things, but there is always like the original. Whereas obviously like the concept for MetaZoo is very cool, and like you were saying, Bigfoot, they don't own that. You can get like content for all these types of supernatural things elsewhere, and they have to beat all of those. Whereas Pokemon didn't when they came out. They created something new. Obviously, like they had competitors and whatnot, but it wasn't like one to one. They were able to make a concept that was like one of a kind. So we'll see. I mean, it's unique in trading cards, but like in the scheme of life, I don't know if people need that much more Bigfoot content or like all of these other cryptids like Mothman and whatnot. But we have to wait to see.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and this is just my personal opinion, it's not based on really anything substantive, but I think that there's probably an untapped market for monsters. When I look at and cryptids and magical stories around. I mean, I know we have fantastic beasts like in Harry Potter world right now, which I guess kind of reminds me a little of this if I had to compare this to anything. And obviously, like it's magic casters, like the story is like magic and beasts and these types of stuff. But I see potential there, but you have to execute, and you can have all the connections in the world, but that's at least that's not going to make me love something just because you're connected to the right people. Like, you have to capture my imagination now again, but if they're targeting kids are different. And I'm with you. I think that MetaZoo figuring out what kids like and how to get it and appeal to all ages and families to collect. Yeah, we can move on to another topic here, but it's and then I also think that there's various levels of success, before we move on. And I don't think it has to be, I know that Mike and the team want it to be biggest franchise ever or one of the biggest franchises ever, but like you can also be successful by being a decently sized. I think they should absolutely 100% shoot to be the biggest franchise ever. Why not?
Yeah. If they have like, that inspiration and drive, that's always a good sign.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're I believe that they're committed and passionate and all about it. So I saw Aoki and Mike got matching MetaZoo tattoos, and that's, shows some commitment.
That's cute. That would never be me. But that is very, very cute. One thing also, someone mentioned in the comments that MetaZoo is too dark for kids. I actually don't think so. I've responded to them in the comments or in the chat, but I said, like, I used to be a camp counselor until like a few years ago. I remember like 7 and 8 year olds talking about FNAF, like Five Nights at Freddy's, which is a horror game. And certainly this is not as dark as that. And these weren't like, this was like, it was like pretty popular among kids. And like, I think there's a lot of even merchandise geared towards kids. So I think there's definitely a place for that. And sometimes that does appeal to kids more because it makes them feel a bit more grown up. So I think that is one potential there. The one downside is like, their parents, like with old magic, thinking it's witchcraft. But, we're in the 21st century, so I doubt that's as much of a concern now.
What were your favorite cartoons as a kid?
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes. I also liked Winx Club, which literally probably the only one here who watches that. It's a girls' show. Well, I don't want to say them, but it is aimed towards girls. I also really liked Avatar: The Last Airbender. Classic, iconic. What else did I really, really love? I liked My Little Pony, but like I was actually a little girl, so I think that's acceptable. I was not a 30-year-old man. And I'm sorry to any 30-year-old men watching this, or if Jake, you like My Little Pony, there's no shame.
I don't. It's okay.
Okay. What else?
Yeah,
those are some of the big ones. I watched like,
and again, also no disrespect to anyone, but like I was collecting like all the WotC boxes, like because I was just trying to get like one of every WotC booster box, and I skipped over My Little Pony because I was like, I just can't own this. Like it just feels strange for me. But sorry, I shouldn't have done that because to each their own. It's not a nice thing to say. But
man, My Little Pony is an enduring brand. It's got way more track record than Pokemon. So I'm just saying. I also watched like Dragon Ball Z and those types of shows, and Pokemon, of course. Definitely watched a lot of Dragon Ball. So that was definitely an iconic one. It was. I also didn't know what anime it was, so like I didn't know that Yu-Gi-Oh and like Dragon Ball were from Japan. I feel like a lot of kids just didn't realize that. I don't know, because it's like those shows that you're watching on like Saturday morning, like for kids. I know a lot of people watched on there. Everything's like dubbed and they make it American. So when I realized it was like not from the US, I was shocked.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I loved Dragon Ball Z as a kid. My favorites, Yu-Gi-Oh was probably also my favorite anime, at least for a while at a certain age. Every Saturday I watched it, the first season and the second season. Um, I watched Digimon for a little bit. And then as I got a little bit older, Dragon Ball Z was my favorite. And that was my go-to for sure. I also like Scooby Doo when I was really young. I loved that. And before all of that, I love Power Rangers was my favorite when I was like maybe first grade, around that time.
I I also really like Scooby Doo, and I actively disliked Power Rangers as a kid. I remember in preschool one time, I like you could like go take a nap or you could watch the show, and I like went and pretended to be asleep so I didn't have to watch Power Rangers. I don't know why my hatred of it was so deep and probably irrational. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's a great kids show. It seems
I will
cool.
say I watched it again as an adult and it was pretty bad.
That's most shows. You know,
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I mean,
It's
like
just
when I watch Yu-Gi-Oh now, I still enjoy it, but like I'm very conscious of the flaws, and that if I hadn't watched this as a kid, I probably wouldn't be able to enjoy it now.
the thing is the story in Yu-Gi-Oh is phenomenal.
It's
But
such a cool concept.
yeah, and like the first season and the set, like beautiful, and then and then even into like the ancient god cards and also like great story, but the episodes are so slow and the battles are so dumb that like
Okay, you like Dragon Ball Z though, so
the
they're
same
not
thing.
slow.
Dragon
They
Ball
were
Z
trying to sell
has
for like
the same
70
problem.
episodes.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z has the same problem, but
But the longest duel in Yu-Gi-Oh I think is 8 parts, maybe 6.
yeah,
Um, but I think in Dragon Ball Z they fought Cell for 70 episodes, approximately. Someone can fact check me on that, but like, you can't even compare these two.
I like DuckTales. People are talking about DuckTales, classic. Might be too old, too old for you.
No, I know what it is. Don't
You know
worry.
what it is,
Oh, Magic School Bus was iconic.
for sure.
They just replay the same stuff to kids over and over again. So like, it doesn't matter if it's like Dragon Ball or what.
Yeah,
We'll see it 10 years later.
I mean it's only 10-year difference, so it's not too far. A lot of these franchises are stronger now, or as strong as even kids today are watching. Still
Yeah.
watching the same things I was watching.
Well, they just like will also just repackage it like Dragon Ball Z Kai,
Yeah.
which is a brilliant move. I feel like. Let's see.
Dragon Ball just left after freezing.
Let's see if anyone else has any other questions. Because we can start wrapping it up soon, maybe. But if anyone has any more questions, we can definitely take those. I'm not like in a huge rush or anything, but got to be up early to do the grinds.
We plan on wrapping up in the next 20 minutes or so if people have just last few questions or topics, and if not, then we can start to end now. Let's see.
Oh, Inuyasha was really good.
Yeah.
But that was like not really. I feel like that was like not quite as accessible as some of the other ones. So like I didn't start watching that till I was like a little bit older. Yeah.
All right, last minute questions tonight. Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers?
Ninja Turtles. I did watch that show as well as a kid.
I loved both as a kid. Ninja Turtles were definitely longer lasting. Power Rangers got I grew up out of Power Rangers a lot quicker than Ninja Turtles.
But the question is, which Ninja Turtle is your favorite?
I don't have one. I don't know Ninja Turtles well enough I'm trying to remember like which character was which, like which name was which character.
The right answer is obviously Leonardo. So
I have like 30 of those Tops boxes from the 90s. I want to open up some wax packs, Ninja Turtle wax packs. They're cool.
that does sound actually really cool. People really are heated about Inuyasha right now.
Jake T, big fan.
Oh, actually, a lot of the Batman cartoons too were pretty good. SpongeBob as well. Those were all really good.
Yeah.
I also still watch these shows a lot. Like I will go back. I have no shame about watching kids shows still.
Let's see.
Someone says if Pokemon goes to 0, how long will you be paying for your collection, or are you even or playing with house money? You have an answer to
that? So at this point, I am not. I have put money into my Pokemon card collection. There was a point where I hadn't, and I'd actually taken out more. So I had my entire collection, quote unquote, just on stuff that I flipped or some not stuff that I flipped and sold. I was going to say quote unquote for free, whatever that means, but obviously there's a ton of effort and work and all that stuff that goes into it. But no, I theoretically, and then there's also just the opportunity cost and all that type of stuff of what I could have done, or if I had sold it, if I sold my collection now and I put it into stocks, how, big could that grow? And there's all that sort of stuff. But yeah, money can be a problem from my perspective. And there's a balance in your relationship with money to figure out what money can do for you, and then where, in my opinion, and then where money can become a hindrance to relationships, to enjoying life, to spending money on things. And that's there's an equation in there to be found for people, and it's a personal thing. But so for me, I like Pokemon because yes, I can, but it's also just a lot of fun, and it provides a huge hobby and relationships and all sorts of fun things. And if my Pokemon collection went to 0, I would not regret having it. Obviously, if I could sell it at the peak and then rebuy it, maybe I'd want that. But honestly, like, who cares? It's a lot of work. These are my cards and I can afford it. One thing I talk a lot about on this channel is like affording your collection. And what I mean by affording your collection is if your collection went to 0, it wouldn't impact your lifestyle, is really what I mean.
Yeah, I'm also not playing with the house's money. Definitely the current value of my collection is a lot more than I paid for it. And, I've continued to less so now, but I would sell and then buy more. So that helped me grow it for less than the current value of it. If it went to 0, that would suck, obviously. But it wouldn't be the end of the world to me. Because at the end of the day, I do really like these things. And if it goes to 0, never goes back up, I guess I'll just crack these boxes all open.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who ever feels really compelled to open things. If I've ever bought something without the intent to open it, I've never felt any temptation to open it. But if they're worthless, why not? So
I can tell you, if some of these cards I'm after drop down to $10 or $50, I will go online and just say, everyone in the world, if you have this card, I'm buying everyone, every copy that exists. So
yeah.
So
if they go to 0, there are a lot of things I could buy.
There'd be worse things in the world than Pokemon going to 0. There'd be some serious positives. The reality is that part of what really sucked about the mania period in Pokemon was also that it was expensive and we love buying this stuff. And so even though the value of our collection or the things we owned went up, we were unable to continue to buy at the same rate or, finish our collections. And the positives of everything coming back down or continuing to go down would be able to buy more. And, that's a sign of someone who is collecting.
Yeah, for sure. Someone also asked, would you rather have 2 Evolution sealed boxes or a PSA 8 base set unlimited holo master set for a 5-year hold? Man, like, I don't know what you think about this, but for me, I feel like this is like the lesser of 2 evils because I would not like to buy either of those things for that. So I have like 1 Evolutions booster box back there that I did not pay the current market price for. It's very expensive right now, and we all know there's a very large supply of them. And, you know, it's at a point where the price is starting to get a little bit cost prohibitive for a lot of people, and just for how new it is. And also, like, the value of the cards inside is like very, very low relative to the value of the box, unless you get that like PSA 10 Holo Charizard, which is like, you're not gonna, even if you pull it, you're not getting it as a PSA 10. And then the base set Holo Unlimited PSA 8, that's just like, you might as well just buy near mint raw copies for that. And I don't see them going up that much, but like, this is just personal preference. I would rather buy fewer cards that I think are rarer, and also that I would enjoy more, because I don't enjoy evolutions particularly, and I also don't enjoy, you know, base set unlimited holos particularly, and just like the population of them is like very, very high. I'm sure Jake knows better than I do, but you know, with how common they've become, and they're probably going to continue to become more common even, I don't see that much growth happening in the next 5 years.
Yeah. I really agree with that. I think if we extend it to like 15 to 20 years and we take a best possible scenario, which is like Pokemon's grows or triples overall, I would just go with the thesis I've always had, which is that it does not make sense to me how expensive Evolutions is versus base set, the original base set. And I would expect if my rationality prevailed for PSA base set, if those are worth the same amount now, for the PSA base set unlimited holos to do better, even despite the fact that there's going to be a ton more of them graded. If you really talk that long of a timeline and Pokemon really continues to get huge, if there's only like a few thousand of each of those graded, you know, or even maybe 5,000 of, you know, each of those graded in 8, 9s, and 10s, that doesn't seem like that much to me, potentially, where you could start to see some upward movement. But it's just, I wouldn't buy either of those things for sure, which is why I think you picked those. But, you know, I will never understand. I mean, I get it, but on one level, I get it. Now, what do I think? I think that it could easily go the other way based on market trends and based on how the majority of this hobby seems to feel about evolutions. And it could just continue to buck, you know, my subjective opinion. And at the end of the day, you know, who cares what I think? It's what the market thinks, you know, so I'm, you know, well aware of these things.
Yeah, I just have a hard time because I don't like Charizard. I know that that's heresy to say, but like, I mean, he's fine. Like, there are some cool cards with him, obviously. There are definitely some cool cards, but like, I don't feel compelled to just buy things because they're Charizard. Obviously, when we're looking at it from potentially like an investing perspective, it is something worth considering because most people don't feel the way I do. My only really hope for evolutions, like 20 years from now, if we're talking, is that a lot of people would foolishly crack the box open by 20 years from now, hoping to get that PSA 10 Charizard. That's the only way I could see that outperforming. And like you're saying, just these current trends with Charizard and certain people like wanting it for their collection, because even if they're not planning to open it, of course, because they are just very dedicated to Charizard. There are a lot of people like that. So maybe.
I just personally will never understand why someone wants a reprint of Charizard from 2016 when there's already.
I don't like the way those cards look either. I think they look pretty terrible.
Yeah, like, and that's I really like base set because I grew up with it, but you know, it's but now if you think evolutions compared to base set doesn't look good in terms of the layout and the feel of the card, that's what you mean. Oh, I definitely agree with that.
Like, they could have
I like the look of CP6. But at the end of the day, still it's a reprint, and reprinted arts and other hobbies are worth, I'm a broken record on this topic though on this channel. And so it's we'll just see. We'll see how market sentiments work out over time. But I would, going back to that question, I would look at rarer places. They're more undervalued, nicher, underknown things, and then there are rare items that are popular that are within the price range that I would go for over those.
Also, just for like an easy example, for like $800, which I think is probably approximately the current price of an Evolutions box, you could buy 10 boxes of Fusion Strike, Chilling Reign, etc., or 5 of each even, if you want to diversify a little bit, if that's, relatively diverse compared to just buying 10 of one. And I'm pretty confident that 20 years from now, 10 of those boxes will be worth more than one Evolutions box for 800.
I wouldn't be shocked if those booster boxes are worth more than Evolutions booster boxes someday. That's rational. And that's insane, right? That's an insane thing to say right now, but that's how much I do not understand the value of Evolutions. And I think that there's a lot left. Now, a ton of it got opened, and there might be not enough now to go around. And if you look at the expected value, I mean, honestly, we might be getting to a point where the expected value of that compared to and you did some expected value stuff recently, so maybe offhand, but like, I wouldn't be shocked if we're getting to a point where like the expected value of Evolutions is starting to get closer and closer to like an Evolving Skies or something like that, where it's like not that far off. Although I guess it's tough with Evolutions because you can grade potential. If grading comes all the way down, you can grade a lot more of the cards, including like the secret rares. And if you get 10s, you can still sell them for probably $40-$50. So you can recoup. There's a lot more value across the set, but I don't know.
Apply that to the other sets too. If we're going to say we're going to grade the Evolutions cards, like it's only fair to say we grade those Evolving Skies cards too.
There's just a lot less to grade. Yeah. Like only get it, because I'm not sure. Like you can grade the full arts, probably some of the full arts, but not all of them. And then you can grade the alt arts, you can grade the rainbow rares, and you can grade the gold cards. But a lot of the rainbow rares too are worth nothing, and some of the gold cards are worth almost nothing graded. So I don't know. Versus like you in Evolutions, you have all of the reverse hollows, you have like the secret rares that are really, really easy to pull. And whatever. It's ridiculous. I truly don't understand how people are paying $50 to $100 for some of those cards still. But at one point they were at $200 to $400. So whatever.
Like, I don't get how anyone would want a PSA 10 reverse hollow. Like, I think Chansey's in there, pretty sure. Like from Evolutions, just like, man, I don't get it. And like, I also don't get, like, also going back to Unlimited, like, I don't get why people, I mean, it's okay if you want the master set, but like people who are just buying these slabs because they think they're cheap, like a PSA 8 base set, Unlimited, like Chansey, or just these like not desirable Pokemon, for me, just like it's something I would never want to buy because I'd never want to own it personally, which is interesting because some people do, obviously, but a lot of people buying these are just buying them hoping they'll go up. And I think that applies to a lot of things in Pokemon, but like some of these vintage WotC cards in particular.
I'll tell you that every single card from base set is extremely valuable and important to me, including the trainers.
Okay, well, let's think we're talking about Jungle or Fossil.
And Jungle and Fossil. But that's because as a kid, I remember opening those packs and discovering those cards for the first time and filling out those binders. So literally every single card brings back a lot of memories. So it's very specific. Now, but what's so interesting about it, right, is having your perspective of someone who didn't have that perspective as a kid be like, what? Like, why do people care about these like random commons and uncommons, like jungle trainers that make absolutely no sense? And I think that that's completely reasonable, so the lesson and the thing that I think about that is sort of like, what are going to be the cards? What are going to be the Pokemon that are going to be popular across the generations? And these are things that I mean, one thing I think about is I'm surprised that mythicals and legendary Pokemon are not more of a thing in terms of the collecting world. where people are not trying to collect all the mythical Pokemon or all the legendary Pokemon or, and all the starters from each generation. Like, I don't get it. Like, those are the rarest Pokemon in the show. They have the most important roles in some of the anime and some of the video games. And yet it's always the base set starters and it's always the original Pokemon that tend to do the best. And I'll be honest with everyone here, I'm betting against that. I'm betting on some of these newer Pokemon and some of these newer legendaries and mythicals myself and other things. There are some cards that have like came down like 75% in value, 80% in value that I'm buying of some of these cards right now from Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield and X and Y. And it's amazing to me.
Almost all of my favorite Pokemon personally are legendaries.
Yeah.
So I also don't get that. And if I'm going to be spending a lot of money on a single, it's almost always going to be it's always going to be a Pokemon card that I really like, which is usually going to be of a Pokemon that I really like because the two typically go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So when I'm spending a lot of money, it is usually on cards that are legendaries or mythicals, either one. So I also don't get that. For me, it's just what I like. And if I'm going to spend a lot of money on something, it should be something I like. And like, if I do, someone else probably does as well. I think a lot of people do like these cards. They're just not or like these Pokemon as well. They're just like not as hyped. And that could change in the long run, especially like
relationships with them.
Yeah.
Like it's totally honest. It's not, but people aren't thinking long term. Like, it takes a while for people to develop relationships with these Pokemon. But if you actually think kids today, like, now there's going to be some of it, which is like the parents are going to tell the kids like what is valuable. And that's part of why you're seeing kids scream when they hit the Charizard. And money talks. Like, if you pull a $200 kid Charizard as a little kid, you're going to remember that the rest of your life. Like, let's not kid ourselves. That's huge. And that's going to impact prices forever, but at the same time, being pushed in the anime, being pushed in the video games, like, kids are going to develop special relationships with a lot of these Pokemon that we don't have, or that adults don't have, and that we don't understand, in my opinion, over time.
Oh, for sure. If I were a kid, I think like Zacian and Zamazenta are really, really cool legendaries. Like, I think they are actually quite cool. Like, they're way better than XY. And there are some cards where if I were a kid, I think that I don't know if you've seen the Zacian from Astral Radiance that's going to come out, but that card, I think would imprint on me as a kid and leave quite an impression and be something that I would always remember if I ever pulled it. And it would just be something that I would definitely want. And so I don't know, if you try and imagine it, what kids would be most excited about, I think that a lot of them are going to be these newer Pokemon that they're more familiar with. But of course, they are swayed by by their parents and whatnot, and Charizard's a dragon and whatever, people like it. But he's not even cool looking.
Yeah.
Hot take, but he's kind of weird looking. Not the best dragon in Pokemon, that's for sure.
Jamie Scott says it's going to be hard to form relationships with Pokemon when there's 5,000 and new ones every year. Yeah, I think that it dilutes it a little bit. But versus the original 151, it's why I always think the original 151 will be the most popular and most important Pokemon, followed by the second and third generations. But at the same time, it's part of why legendaries it's a much smaller group of Pokemon that can really stand out in every era. In your later eras, I would not be going as wide or as deep in terms of collecting all of these Pokemon or thinking all of them are going to stand the test of time as much as your original 151. There's going to be a lot more of those that stand the test of time. But I do think your top ones, your ones that Pokemon is pushing, is putting on the covers of their games. These are the people are going to be looking at these games forever, playing these games forever, seeing that Pokemon, searching for that, trying to catch it, playing with it. There's going to be a lot of that stuff. And, we'll see.
No, for sure. I agree. I think that, the legendaries are what the other media focus on and emphasize, whether it is the games or the show. So I think it just is intuitive that future kids are going to have attachments to them. I Gen 2, those legendaries are probably my favorite group. And I grew up with those, but I also grew up with Gen 3 as well, and the later ones as well, like, but I was a bit older, obviously. But those ones definitely have like left the biggest imprint, and some of that has to do with like the other media, like the movies. I don't know. I think if you see those when you're a kid, they can definitely leave a big impact on you. I don't know if the movies like are as big now as they used to be, but who knows what it'll be like going forward. But yeah, also you can probably hear the people next to me listening to music. So we should probably wrap it up soon so people don't have to endure that for too long.
Let's wrap it up. So thank you so much for coming on the channel. Thank you to everyone watching and hanging out with us tonight. Hopefully you'll accept another invitation on again, maybe for a roundtable or something in the future.
Well, if you'll have me.
Absolutely. And any last minute thoughts or anything tonight? Of course, go subscribe to her channel. I'll put a link after the video gets up, and all that good stuff. But
I feel like we've already said a lot, but thank you guys all so much for watching. I'm sorry that like we couldn't respond to every message in the chat, but hopefully, we got to like a decent amount of people's questions. And I really like doing these live streams. They are a lot of fun. It's nice getting to like actually interact with people in real time. So it's been really fun.
For sure. All right. Everyone have a good night, and we'll see you all in a future one. Thanks, guys.